Well, hello there, and welcome to another Saturday morn D&D newscast. How's everybody doing out there in internet land? I'm a little unready. This took me by surprise today. Repping the First Order, apparently. I am simultaneously repping the First Order / my Star Wars love. Let's just leave it at that. And the real Dread Pirate Roberts. Little Princess Bride love there. My my headset / monitor is doing all kinds of fun things today. And that's what we have planned. Lots of fun things for you today on this fine Saturday morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Angela in the house. Hello, Pleasant Dew. Making some hot wing sauce. That sounds delicious. How hot are we talking here? How hot are the saucy wings gonna be? I love me some spice. I'm trying to get like a happy medium here between like cap, brim, and face, so you can see the anguish firsthand as I wrestle with technology. I'm behind today, man. I woke up late because I was on the Zoom with friends until late last night. It was very nice to chat with them. If you're just joining us, if you're new to the stream, say hello. Don't be a stranger. Throw me a follow, a subscribe, or whatever, whatever you like on the platform that you are currently watching. For our friends in Twitch land, please do toss me a follow. Say hello. And let's talk about the Dungeons and the Dragons. And my ongoing struggle with technology. I had a lot of like green screen issues. You can't really tell in this screen, but when we move to the Speaking Common newscast here shortly, it gets like frizzy. There's like this weird kind of glitchy frizziness happening, and I never had that before. So I think it's in two parts. One, it might be my green screen. It might not be lit properly. Two, I may not have the correct green color selected. And three is I might need to update OBS. There you go. Pretty hot but not insane, Angela. It won't have the time to marinate. Oh, I see. Gotcha. So the longer you let it bathe in your delicious hot sauce, the more dangerous it gets. Is that a fair assumption? I look like I'm sitting low behind the bar today. Is that where's my head? Where does the magic end? Right there. That's where the magic ends. Oh, I know why, because that's my hair room usually. Let's see what we got here. There we go. It looks like I'm not like a dwarven bartender. Hey, welcome to me tavern. A pirate dwarven bartender. That's all I got this morning. Fair, yeah, that's a good thing to say. I'm struggling because this is not an eating stream. This is not a social eating stream, but I'm looking at my breakfast, which I haven't touched, and it's sitting there. I think now's the time to do it. Would you guys forgive me if I start to work on a bagel as we do this thing? You will turn. Next time we meet, you'll take my hand, and you will turn. It's my best Kylo Ren. My best Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. Bagel. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeedly do. What say we create a little hype here? I'm going to make a tweet for the tweeters. And that tweet's going to say something like, hey, you. Hey there, bud. Why don't you come on inside and say hello to me and the crew? We've been waiting for you. So what do you think? Too creepy? Just creepy enough? Da, 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 da. I'm I'm doing the Facebooks now at Shambazla Games. But if you follow me on Twitter, it's mainly the same stuff. Slightly less content going out over Facebook than I have over Twitter, because Facebook folk, they don't like that much content. You know, they like just a little bit of content, but not all the content. Take 20, welcome, good morning, happy to have you. How are things where you fine folk are today? We had snow this morning. But I don't think I can complain to Take 20 D&D, who's in the real north. We'll say proper north. Sunny, yes. In AB, I love Alberta. It's beautiful. It's such a beautiful province. And you guys are doing well out there, last I saw. Looks like things are I'm actually not going to say anything because I don't want the blame to fall to me if I jinx it, but stay strong out there, Alberta. Leading the pack. Oh, the East Coast is also kicking ass. Things are plateauing. Good. Yeah, we've started to report here in Ontario, actually Ontario, far fewer outstanding cases and a grand majority of them being recovered now, which is nice. Yeah. Hey, but we've got D&D to keep us busy. We have Zoom to stay in touch with friends, which is what I was doing last night. It was really nice, actually. I have a pretty healthy mix of friends who are trying to enjoy their time off, and friends who are working like maniacs, myself included. So it was important, and I think healing to get together with friends and maintain that connection. What I've found in all this is that the disconnect is so gradual that you don't realize the impact until you're carrying it all at the same time. You kind of look back on it. It's like, yeesh. You got to talk. You got to talk about it, right? Dr. Feargood, welcome to the stream. Good to have you all. The crew is coming alive as we begin our Saturday morning, our Dungeons and Dragons fix for this fine Saturday. Good morning, Doctor. Yes, indeed. 100% still need the TTRPG and social. I played a great game last night with some friends. Take 20. Yes, do tell. Actually, yeah, everyone in chat, please tell me about your most recent Dungeons and Dragons experience. Let me live vicariously through you. I'll kick it off, give you guys some time to talk and get and get this time to go through the internet to your ears. Actually, we're doing really well today. No real delay, which is nice. So we launched the first, or we kicked off the series DM's Guild Feature Showcase with the cast on Wednesday, which is my live streaming game that specifically features DM's Guild publishers. In this case, we are featuring a great module from Jeff Stevens and JVC Perry called Scourge of the Nightingale, of which our very own Pleasant Doom is, of course, part of that pack. It was a great session, if I do say so myself. We were still talking about it in Discord days later, so I always look at that as a good sign. No games this weekend. I cry. I feel you. I do at least now have a Sunday standing game remote with some of my RL friends. So I can't complain. I have been playing more D&D in the last month than I have in probably the year prior. But our home game, Charisma Check, the Charisma Check podcast is on hold, which breaks my heart because that's my baby. That's my baby. I love all of my content children, of course, but that's kind of like where it all started for me with actual play. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah, what were you playing last night? Take 20. Was it D&D or was it another system? Hello, good morning. If you're just joining us, I hope your Saturday is off to a wonderful start. It did snow a lot here last night, but it's all gone now, and that's all I care about. Take 20 D&D 5e. The party instigated a prisoner uprising in the Theric Iron Mines. Had only just found the exit and oh my god. See, you guys know I can't use words, right? So as long as we're good with that, we'll continue. each other amidst the chaos of fleeing prisoners, and after discovering clues about their kidnapping and imprisonment, they found a way out of being lost in the wilderness. Nice. Homebrew campaign setting. Very, very nice. That sounds cool. A good old-fashioned prison break / riot. So that was a kickoff? Was that like a session 1? They found the exit and each other amidst the chaos of fleeing prison. Nice. Was that a campaign kickoff? That sounds awesome. What a great way to kick off a campaign. A little bit of chaos, a little bit of danger, a very different setting, which is good. Oh, 6th session. I still stand by what I said. I see. So they were captured. Very nice. Also a good way to kick off a campaign, though. Just saying. So 6th session is still a relatively new campaign then, right? How frequently are you playing that one? Let's get a little Twitter love out there. Let me see. What should we say? Let's say about to jump into D&D weekly news. I was saying I'm a little bit behind today because I slept in late. I needed it this week, though. This week was a monster. Every week, every Friday, 7-Eleven Mountain. Nice. 7 to 11. I've been trying to do an evening stream Monday to Thursday from 10 to 11, just playing video games. And I'm not going to lie, it's a challenge for me to stay up until 11. Although if I was playing D&D, I imagine that would probably melt away. Melt away, I say. When do you folks usually go to bed? For me, I try to be like in bed by 11. But yeah, this new content schedule, I'm loving it a lot. But this is the first week through it, and I am refining my processes to keep up with it all. It's a lot of work, but it's fulfilling work. It feels good, so I'm happy about that. Challenge for me to stay up late, but usually in bed by 11 or thereabouts. I'm with you. Now that I've tried to push the stream to 11 o'clock, I'm now trying to get to bed by 11:11 / 11:15. That's what we got. As we age gracefully, we really try to like min-max our bedtime. Is that right? Like, am I alone in that? Let me see here. I am writing the tweeters. That sounds extremely tense. Oh, sorry. I have to get better. I always like to read chat from the bottom up. I don't know why. So let's try that again. Take 20 lately been diving into Call of Cthulhu. Oh, the video game. When was that? When was that released? How recent is that? That sounds pretty awesome. Dr. Feargood, we are at 4th level with 5 of us. The large ship we were on was ambushed by 2 fiends of known origin that were casting control water, among other stuff. Although 10 shadows and 4 shadow mastiffs, we lost one. One was in the water, which survived. We had 4 shadows left, and the 2 fiends, and all on low hit points. I had found a superior healing potion and used it. And next round rolled a 20, did smite, and destroyed 1 fiend. So that was the turn around. And we survived. Well, all but 1. What do you think? That's how I'm going to read all of your game synopses. That's what we're doing. Sounds extremely tense. I agree. Take 20. High stakes there. Fair good. Oh, and my strength was down to 6. Oh, the fiends, were they dropping your strength? You nasty. Especially trapped aboard a ship? Yeah. Call of Cthulhu released in 2018. It's amazing so far. What is this? What is this? What is this? I'm going to have to check that out. Call of Cthulhu video game. Psychological meets survival horror. Nice. With all the eldritch trimmings. It would not be a true COC experience without the eldritch underpinnings. Am I right? Interesting. Let's see if we can...
Rated M.
Whoops, no. Stop it. You're not... This is not about you. Let's see if we can... just for kicks. Pop that up right here. What say you folks? Shall we see if we can get a little video thing going here? Let's see. Nice. There we go. Let's check it out.
For mature.
This time with audio.
Rated M for mature.
Greetings, and welcome to Call of Cthulhu, the official adaptation of Chaosium's tabletop RPG from Focus Home Interactive and Cyanide Studio. This is you, Edward Pierce, war veteran, private investigator, struggling alcoholic. You come to the near-forgotten Darkwater Island to look into the deaths of the Hawkins family after an inferno engulfed their stately home.
Well, here we are, Hawkins Mansion.
$1693. This house is much older than it seems.
Whoa! Whoa! You were trying to force the door, you nosy prick!
Easy, sir, all right? Put down the axe.
You know what we do with rubble like you? We gut them. Dump them into the ocean.
Whoa! You're Mr. Winchester. Lower that axe. Let's talk calmly.
I'll show you how we have it out on Darkwater.
The encounter with groundskeeper Winchester can be resolved in a number of
Sarah
ways.
Hawkins' father
Intimidation,
sent me here to
subterfuge,
investigate the death of his
good old-fashioned sneaking. It's your choice. Your skills will determine your fate and are improved throughout your journey.
Dead to rest in peace.
Follow me. I know the place.
Incidental details will tie into your understanding of what happened to the Hawkins family and the story of the island as a whole. Your skills will determine how much knowledge you can glean from a painting, a book, or a ritual circle.
The Last Supper of the Hawkins. What does this...
Still muted. Yes, thank you. No, that looks amazing. As you know, my special power is speaking through mute. That looks awesome. Yeah, thanks for the heads up. I like that a lot. That's very cool. Welcome. If you're just joining, we're just checking out Call of Cthulhu game, and it's on it's available on console too, which is great. And that is the type of gaming I do on stream, actually. A little PlayStation. Yeah, I have to check that out. Thanks, Take 20. Our friends at Take 20 D&D. When are you guys streaming again? You guys are coming up this afternoon, yeah? Also, that trailer let me get through half a bagel, so thank you. Just a little old piece of horror sweetness. You know, as they say, just the right amount of horror to get your morning started off. J-Man just moved. Oh, the morning show won't be till next weekend. Nice, nice. Well, thank you for passing the time with us until you go live. We should do something together, I think. My humble opinion. I'm just saying. I'd love to hang out with you guys on stream or something. Throwing it out there. Speaking of throwing it out there, let's start with the Dungeons and Dragons weekly news on Speaking Common. Here we go. We had a pretty full week. It's funny because I've been wrestling a little bit with my green screen, and actually now it looks okay. And what I've realized is that I think the problem I'm running into is my hair. So before we get started, very important community announcement here. I'm going to take my hat off on stream, which I've never ever done before. So the six dozen, 6 dozen, same thing of you are going to witness this. Now look. Now see, it does this like little animated like sparkly thing around my hair. That's what I was trying to get rid of, and I don't know how. So maybe it's just wide brim life from here on in. That's it. Because I don't want these like dancing sparkles around my head. Anyway. That's what y'all came here for. And yes, we absolutely should. Let's make it happen on the record. Nice. Check out Take 20 if you have a chance, folks. After the stream, pop over, throw them a follow, say hello. Good folks over there. Fellow Canucks. This week, UK comedy slash do-gooder fundraising team Comic Relief announced that they, in partnership with Wizards of the Coast, were running a D&D one-shot. Some stand-up folks, as I say, to help benefit companies and organizations that were severely impacted by COVID-19. Of course, who hasn't been, but it was a nice gesture for the UK-based group to try to put something together and leverage the D&D format and, of course, the rising popularity of Dungeons & Dragons to run this one-shot. And it was a great little kind of run through. It was enjoyable. They wound up raising over £28,000, which is double Canada money, so... over 50 grand actually they were raised for in our currency, or what would be in our currency, for local businesses who were really struggling under some of these economic impacts of COVID-19. So it's a nice gesture. It's always fun to see people leveraging the hobby that we enjoy and share to try and do good in the world, and this was a good part of it. They're a registered charity or nonprofit in the UK, and they specialize in entertainment-based relief fundraisers. They do things like comedy, stand-up comedy shows. They do things like, of course, this now, new Dungeons & Dragons show. It was just a one-time thing, but they've done a lot of other things as well. And they have two hallmark events, one called Red Nose Day and the other called Sport Relief, that they leverage to kind of help manifest these and do good things in the world. So it was pretty cool. The one shot featured a GM or DM Paul Foxcroft, who was fairly well equipped for the job because he also runs a live Dungeons and Dragons show called Questing Time, and it's a live D&D comedy show as well. So check out Paul Foxcroft. You can check out Comic Relief as well. They held the fundraiser via Tiltify. And before the one-shot was run, players were welcomed to participate in polls that determined what kind of weird, kind of quirky things happened to the characters through the course of the event. The players who were involved in Comic Relief's one-shot of this Comic Relief's Dungeons & Dragons one-shot in partnership with Wizards of the Coast were Sue Perkins, who is the host of a UK baking show called The Great British Baking Show. Funny lady as well. And she's actually also signed up to helm her own Netflix show, which is previously untitled at the moment. Nish Kumar, who is also a BBC host and a local, or let's say small UK legend, I suppose. He has experienced some polarizing comedy engagements over the last 6 months, but it looked like they were having a really good time on stream yesterday, so maybe a nice shift for Nish and friends. The third player in the mix was a gent named Ed Gamble, who actually, before COVID-19, had a huge roster of stand-up engagements plotted for all over the UK and globally. So some really good talent in there, and he has his own Amazon Prime video feature called Blood Sugar, if you want to check out Ed Gamble as well. And finally, rounding out the player teams was Sarah Pascoe. Sarah's a staple of UK stand-up comedy and improv comedy over there, and our friends across the pond. Having worked with people like Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and if you Google Sarah Pascoe, you will just see hours and hours of YouTube and live footage from her various stand-up routines and things like that. So very easy to find these folks. Of course, the one-shot is complete. You can always watch the VOD on the Twitch, the D&D Twitch channel. And if you want to get the details on that, check out my article at shambasilgames.com, which covered it as well. Now, personally, I take a great amount of excitement from seeing folks get into the hobby of Dungeons & Dragons, particularly using it for a good cause. But we've seen this kind of thing before, right? So we've seen charity streams in D&D. We've seen a lot of great improv and a lot of great comedic actors or performers playing Dungeons & Dragons. So it's not something that's terribly new in and of itself. They drew a pretty good following. When I was watching, it was around 4,500 to 5,000 viewers, which is not something to, scoff at. I would love to have that many viewers. But when you compare it with some of the bigwig and like the large sort of iconic players, it's probably not in the highest range of things. But then again, oftentimes we find that those who are of notoriety in the UK, they might not be as well known over here in the Western world, let's say, or in the North American continent, particularly in the US. Canada has always had some really great ties with the UK, and I think we share a style of humor and story that creates some unity there. But those icons in UK, let's say the celebrity culture in the UK and the celebrity culture in the US is not always the same, right? So it takes them a little bit more time to generate audiences to break in. But they had a really good, respectable following, great viewership, and they crushed their goal, which was, I think, £27,000, and are doing some really great things to help the local community there too. So it's always fun. I was a little bit worried that when you get comedians around the table to play Dungeons and Dragons, that there's a one-up culture that tends to happen. Bless their little hearts. But it can be tiring, let's be honest. If comedians are always kind of trying to force the funny or be funny for the sake of being funny because, hey, I'm a comedian, people expect this from me, then it can get a little bit exhausting, right? Because then that starts to become more important than the game they're there to play. But from what I saw last night, it looked like it was actually a really fun campaign. There was not much of that I saw. It was very low personal competition and very much party oriented. So it looked like a good little trip for them, and I'm glad that they did well with it. And it's nice to see that Wizards of the Coast is sharing the limelight to people like that who want to do these types of things and both promote the hobby as well as do something great to impact their local community. So really nicely done. Good on you, Comic Relief, and fantastic job from Paul, Sue, Nish, and Sarah and Ed in bringing all of this to life. So I had to make sure I was getting their name rights before I went ahead and committed that. As a lot of you know, this week the Dungeon Masters Guild, the online digital marketplace for third-party creations and publishers in the Dungeons and Dragons scope, announced the Play It Forward event, which is a 2-week event wherein DM's Guild will actually forego their typical 50-50 split with creators and forward all the funds and proceeds from purchases made on DM's Guild until May 17th directly to the creators. This is really incredible. It's a rare opportunity. Creators work really hard. There are so many fantastic third-party independent creators in the D&D circuit and the TTRPG publishing circuit in general. It's nice that DM's Guild is going to take this moment to forward all the proceeds to them, because typically, look, the reality is you own a distribution platform like an Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, Walmart, whatever it is. The house has to take a cut, right? The house has to take some, or the platform has to take some of those sales to keep the lights on, to produce the platform, to maintain it, to onboard new vendors, things like that. But I've never seen any of them do anything like what DM's Guild is doing for third-party creators in these next 2 weeks. So I definitely encourage you, if you've ever been on the fence about trying DM's Guild or buying a third-party piece of content, this is the week to do it. A lot of them are between $1 and $3 a piece. And you think about the hours and hours and hours of work that go into some of these. I think it's really worthwhile to get on there and show some love to creators and do the right thing and get them the support that they need, especially now, to keep fueling our adventures and fantasies with great new content outside of some of the official things that are available. So I didn't really have any specific endorsements around that particularly. Just go check it out, because I spent a lot of time on DM's Guild. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, where I did a feature this week. Actually, I gave myself a $50 budget. I went on DM's Guild and I just checked things out, and I went to honestly see how much damage I could do with $50 US. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that too. It was an easy one for me because I don't publish or create content for DM's Guild yet. It's something that I've been thinking about in the future, so we'll see where that future takes me in that regard. But right now I have enough on my plate, so there's nothing really in it for me beyond that, just wanting to really showcase some of these great creators. But between DM's Guild, their partners, and the creators, like I said, I think it's nice for them to forward the full stake or the full take for this content rather than their 50-50 split, which I believe is what they usually have on the platform. That said, if you are a creator too, a writer, an author, and there are things that you would like to produce on DM's Guild, it's not that hard to get into, and just know that that's it, right? So whatever you price your stuff at, you're going to get 50. The platform's going to get 50, and that turns it into a volume game depending on where you are in your career. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more specifics towards the end of the show about what my experience was on DM's Guild, the budget that I took, what I was able to get, and the types of things that influenced my buying decision when I was deciding who to support and who to purchase from and what to purchase and how. So more to come on that. As I mentioned, community-wise, we've got some of our wonderful players in the chat today. Nerdy Chicken, hi, Nikki. Welcome. Glad to see you. Glad to see you. This week on Wednesday, we launched the DM's Guild Showcase. This is the DM's Guild Feature Showcase, continuing on with the theme of supporting our third-party content creators. DM's Guild Showcase is a bi-weekly streamed Dungeons & Dragons campaign on Twitch, Mixer, YouTube, Twitter, whatever your streaming platform of choice is. It features two things that I love. One, third-party creators. So we take a module, we play it through, and that brings me to the second thing I love, which is our amazing community. So I was able to welcome some incredible community members to the table, the virtual table, of course, who've joined us. Those are Dads and Dragons, at Chickenly Nerd, at Pleasant Doom, and at Just Drawn Radio. So check them out on the Twitters. Wonderful players. We had a great time in our first inaugural session. Started Wednesday, and the next session is Wednesday, May 20th, and it will be every second Wednesday thereafter. This is the advent of something that I kicked off a couple of months ago, where I petitioned the community to let me know if they were interested in participating in a test community D&D group. As you know probably by now, unless you're just meeting me, in which case, hello. I produce a lot of D&D content daily, a lot of feature content, and I had always kind of looked at what's the best thing that I can now offer this community. I think I've got a good base set. I'm comfortable with where I am on content production and my social media presence. Now I want to really produce something that is of value to this community, and the first thing that came to my mind was games. We all love Dungeons and Dragons. We love to talk about it. We love to build and interact with content that speaks to the hobby that we love. But resoundingly and most frequently, what I hear from the community that they want more of is opportunities to play. So this really was the advent of that. But with so many great and amazing actual plays out there in the market, so many great podcasts and streams, I wanted to do something that was a little different. So that's where the concept of DM's Guild Feature Showcase came from. I wanted to take my desire to bring great community members to the table and play D&D with them, together with an opportunity to showcase some of the great 3P community creators that we have. So that meant the campaign that I basically went through the same process, and I petitioned the creators and said, hey, if you've got something like this, and I was specifically seeking adventure modules, campaigns, things that I could adapt and run a game around, to let me know. And I had a lot of really great submissions, and they still come in today. Ultimately, we picked this great little 3-part micro campaign by Jeff Stevens and JVC Perry called Scourge of the Nightingale, which follows the legacy of a past that haunts the Hillsfar regions. I can't get too far in detail, especially with two of my players in the chat right now. Thanks for showing up, gang. So we've got to try and keep it, low key. Ultra Venom, thank you very much for the follow. Welcome to the stream. Glad to have you on board. Welcome to the Checkmates. You're part of an amazing crew of gamers, aficionados, GMs, players alike, and we talk about D&D all the freaking time. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Bringing the publishers and the players together was, I think, the right striking point for this. So, thusly, DM's Guild Feature Showcase was born. Now, the idea of keeping it bi-weekly is for me to fill that other off week with a different type of community gaming, and I'm looking at that being like an intro to D&D for relatively newer players, and also people who are, let's say, maybe need an introduction to Roll20, things like that. Oh, Kelly, welcome. Thank you. Glad to have you on board. Kelly Eros. Now we know your Twitch stream handle too. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you. The Take 20 crew, the Take 20 D&D crew in strength today. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. So do tune in every Wednesday or second Wednesday after May 20th to check out that campaign as it evolves. We do have a really great group of players, in my clearly biased opinion, but we're off to a great start. And you, of course, can check out the video edit of that on either YouTube, Twitch, Mixer, or your platform of choice. So hope to see you soon. In other news this week around Dungeons & Dragons, D&D Beyond got virtual dice. They're bringing the virtual dice game. It was only made available to alpha and subscribers, so they're very early stages with this, but we saw some visual elements and creative around the dice that they're producing. Now, that in and of itself was pretty cool news, but it really piqued my interest as D&D Beyond continues to make more aggressive moves that clearly shout that they are making their way into virtual tabletop territory like Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, Astral, and Tabletop Simulator. So I kind of just loosely, jokingly made the call that my bet is that D&D Beyond will be into a proprietary virtual tabletop inside of 12 to 18 months. On further investigations, some of our great Twitter community members had called out that they had actually, shortly after, I think about 13 hours after that, D&D Beyond confirmed in another thread that they have always had virtual tabletop and a closed system virtual setting on their long-term roadmap. So invariably now confirmed, aside from just bringing digital dice to D&D Beyond, that D&D Beyond is now moving aggressively towards building a virtual tabletop setting. Personally, I find that pretty exciting. I would love to give that a shot. I think in the past Wizards had tried to build like a virtualization or a digitization of the Dungeons and Dragons experience. I don't quite remember what it was called, but I thought it was also called D&D Next, which we know was the working title for D&D 5e when it was in concept. But it seemed like they had some real trouble making it work. I don't know if they had the right skill set or the right resources in-house to really own and get that off the ground. But now with D&D Beyond, which started as a founding opportunity between the licensor of Dungeons & Dragons and Curse LLC, they've now they've started to do a lot more of this, bringing partners in with the right equipment to achieve these types of goals. And I believe that's why D&D Beyond is experiencing a much better uptake than Wizards' previous attempts at digitizing Dungeons & Dragons had. Of course, we have a lot of other avenues that are available to promote and do great things for these types of properties, like endorsements on Critical Role, various other content creators who are reviewing and producing things. They've also built presence around D&D Beyond itself, which they hadn't done previously. So that's Todd, I'm probably butchering this, but Kaepernick, and of course the D&D Beyond team, who are kind of building their own social business around D&D Beyond, which is the right way to do it. So they're producing tons of content. They've got their own streaming actual play. They're basically checking off all the right boxes that D&D social and digital media consumers want to receive from businesses like this. So I think all of that contributes to the great uptake of D&D Beyond in this generation of it. So we'll dial all that back. I wanted to go a little bit deeper on who D&D Beyond actually is, because there's a common misconception that D&D Beyond and Wizards of the Coast are the same, and they're not. They're actually completely different entities, but there's obviously a very tight partnership there. This tends to be the sticking point around conversations like, well, if I buy a hardcover book, why don't I get a D&D Beyond version? Or if I get a digital version, then I should get a coupon here. Or if I buy a book, then I should have a coupon code for a digital version. And there are lots of arguments on both sides of that debate with lots of validity. But the reality is, at the end of it, they're not the same company. So it's similar to saying, like, if I buy Spider-Man for PlayStation, then I should also get Spider-Man for Xbox, even though Microsoft and PlayStation don't share funds that way, right? So it's akin to that. Curse, if you've ever played World of Warcraft or really any kind of MMO through the early 2000s to the present, you might recognize that Curse was a huge third-party app database that created mods for these types of games, and they had all kinds of other things too. So Curse, that is the Curse Gaming LLC, was the founder of D&D Beyond. In fact, Twitch itself used to be a Curse property also. So Curse had built this empire around millions and millions of MMO, massively multiplayer online role-playing game players, in this huge database of mods for those respective games, and over time just accumulated clearly enough funds to bring Twitch TV into being, which was formerly Justin TV. I'm super dating myself now, but if you remember it, that used to be a thing called Justin TV. So they all kind of started to buy up and build these properties together before Amazon bought Twitch. Curse dissolved. The other partner at play in D&D Beyond is actually fandom.com. And if you've ever searched anything nerd culture geeky at all, you've probably come across fandom.com. It's a massive content site, very similar to like your wikis, let's say, or like Wikipedia. Fandom.com, a huge editorial content conglomerate revolving around anything nerd-based or geek-based. They are actually now the primary partner in D&D Beyond. So that's a little bit of the who's who of D&D Beyond. And then, of course, Dungeons & Dragons is a wholly owned private brand for Hasbro under their branch operations with Wizards of the Coast. So that's kind of the parentage on the D&D side versus the parentage and foundership of D&D Beyond. So very clearly two totally different entities. So let's go ahead and bring that up at the dinner table the next time your mom and dad is arguing as to why or not they don't get a free D&D Beyond compendium to their hard copy player's handbook. Nonetheless, we do see that whole machine now moving towards VTT, and that, in a very long roundabout way, is why I'm excited about the prospect of D&D Beyond bringing a new sole prop virtual tabletop to the environment, because I think we need some competition in that realm, and it would be nice to see if and how it all works together. Based on how they've been doing things, I think they have the chops to do it right. So very much looking forward to that, and huge props to the D&D Beyond team for all the great work that you're doing today and on the horizon. So look forward to it. Of course, D&D Beyond and Wizards of the Coast working together to produce a lot more free content in their ongoing Play From Home campaign. There's a ton of free content available on Dungeons & Dragons, D&D.wizards.com. You can also check out my article on shambazzlegames.com, where I've got a master list that specifically focuses on the D&D game content that's available, so the modules, the campaign resources, things like that, and I try to keep that updated as much as I can. I can't do it as to the minute as Wizards can, because my budget is smaller than Wizards of the Coast's budget. But I do really kind of refine down to, I cut out like the coloring pages and things like that and just focus on the adventure content, if you're so inclined to check that out too. All right. So my big play this week, the favorite thing that I did, my big feature was that I went on DM's Guild with a $50 budget, and I spent it during the Pay It Forward event, which, as I mentioned, runs from May 4th to May 17th. And I wanted to share with the community what I got. First of all, DM's Guild is pretty user-friendly. It's a bit of a different system. It's just like any other kind of digital marketplace. It's very easy to navigate, especially now during Play It Forward. And just to reiterate, Play It Forward is a 2-week event where all the proceeds from purchases made on DM's Guild are being forwarded in totality to the creators that made them. So DM's Guild typically has a 50-50 split structure. 50% of the proceeds go to the creator, and the other 50% are rationed by DM's Guild, the platform, and their partners in production. So it's a great time to get on there and make sure that the people that you love to create these things are getting all of that sweet hard-earned cash. So I wanted to do it during this time, and it was such a great experience that I think I might make this a bi-weekly endeavor. Although, disclaimer, I went in with a $50 Canadian budget, and I did like 2.5-3 hours worth of shopping, research, reading to fill my cart. I got it to $49.73, and then I realized that I had not converted it to Canadian. So my Canucks in chat will know what that does to your budget at the click of a button. But it wasn't too bad. I went from $49.73 to 69 something Canadian dollars. So yeah, budget goes boom, exactly. But I was so enthralled and so excited about what I did. I just like what I had in the card. I was like, well, I'm not going to cull it anymore. I'm just going to get all this stuff. But word to the wise, make sure you convert first. Select your little currency converter at the bottom right-hand corner of the DM's Guild interface before you start filling that cart, or you will be due for some unpleasant surprises. And that's not what we want. We want good surprises once shopping on the Dungeon Masters Guild marketplace. So, that said, with creators getting 100% of their hard-earned cash for these pieces, I went to town on some of these great works that I found. Now, I want to call out three. That's six. One hand, three fingers. Three specific creators and pieces that I found that were amazing, well worth the price tag. But they were a little bit more pricey to the point where it would have decimated my modest $50 budget in one swoop. And I didn't want to do that. I want to kind of spread the love as much as I can. So Amarune's Almanac is a collection of lore-based compendiums from Stephen Fiddler and a number of other amazing community contributors. So I definitely recommend you check that out. They've got Amarune's Almanac. It covers a lot of lore and detailed specifics of regions in the Forgotten Realms setting of Faerun, most of which are not officially covered in any published materials from Wizards of the Coast yet. So there's one for the Underdark. There's one for the Forests of Cormanthor, which I found tremendously invaluable. There is one for the glaciers and the ice regions of the north. There's a lot of really great lore compendiums like that. And what that does for me as a game master is it prevents a lot of hours of scouring the internet and refining what lore I believe to be true when I'm preparing adventures in those regions. So let me take that back for a minute. Again, it's Amarune's Almanac. Definitely recommend it. There's a bundle of the first 4 almanacs, including, like I said, Underdark, Forest of Cormanthor, the Glacier North, the Northern Glacial regions. But when I am producing campaigns in a setting, I like to know as much lore about that setting as I can. So if you're running games in the Forgotten Realms, pick them up. I think in total it's like $28 for all 4, and it's a great way to have a good little library of all things Forgotten Realms if you're so inclined. The second is the Uncaged Anthology series. This is a really tremendous work by a number of collaborators, and basically the Uncaged Anthology features like hundreds of small adventures from levels 1, I think, right up to level 10. Before I commit that, I'm actually going to check myself on that one. But this one really appealed to me. I think they're up to, I think they're up to 4 volumes as well. And they're published, the published name is the Uncaged Authors, because they actually curate a lot of really great authors and writers, publishers in the community to contribute to these Uncaged anthologies. They're like $11 or $12 a piece, really cheap, and you get, like I said, hundreds of adventures in each anthology. So I definitely recommend checking that out. Eventually, I will pick up all 4 of these because you can never have enough adventure hooks, ideas, or seeds. So think about that. Uncaged Anthology from the Uncaged Authors on DM's Guild. And the third and final one that really had me intrigued was Call from the Deep by JVC Parry. You might notice this. It's got that beautiful cover of the Illithid, the Mind Flayer, close up on it. It did really well. It continues to do really well. But this is the closest thing I found to a full and complete third-party published campaign resource. So this is on par with like your Tyranny of Dragons, your Princes of the Apocalypse, Storm King Thunders, these great compendiums that are released to take characters from level 1 to sometimes 12 to 17 in a single campaign. A really great piece produced by JVC Parry, of course, a well-known author and producer in the community too. So Call of the Deep by JVC Parry. Check that out. From there, I went ahead and I jumped into DM's Guild with my $50 budget, now in US dollars, and I picked up a number of things. So I wanted to focus specifically on adventures and modules. That was my goal for this. And the reason being, I don't permit third-party rules, adjustments, effects, or mechanics, I guess third-party mechanics. I trust the rules and the official things produced to the official publications from Wizards. So what that means for me as a customer, my goal on what appeals to me on Dungeon Masters Guild are specifically tools that help me do a better job, easier as a game master, and adventures, modules, story plot hooks, and lore that help me craft the worlds that I want to craft. So obviously there's something on there for everything. There are tons of subclass options, new race options, new spells, magic items, all that stuff. But the only hard fast rule I have in my table, or one of the only few hard fast rules I have in my table, is I don't allow just like third party homebrewed mechanical content. So like no new spells or new things like that, new character attributes, stuff like that, because they're relatively untested. They tend to be relatively untested. And while I'm not necessarily talking about DM's Guild, I'm talking about like, somebody found like a version of an Artificer on Reddit and they want to run it, and it's like grossly OP, totally untested, and just a ridiculous concept. So that's the kind of fine line that exists there. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't purchase them on DM's Guild. I'm just saying it's been my practice to focus on lore, tools, and adventure modules and components. So that said, when I went onto DM's Guild, I picked up the 5e Action Tracker, which is a great little tool. It's almost like a placemat kind of printout. It's great for newer players, because what happens when you get around combat with new players, they aren't really sure typically what they can do. And this outlines all that with a little token placement sort of tracker, so they can say, okay, these are the things that you can do in a turn. You have movement, you have action, you have bonus action, reaction. Here's how they apply. Here are some states and statuses breakdowns. Just a really great little kind of placemat sized cheat sheet for new players on what they can do when combat comes around. And in my opinion, anything that makes combat more fluid or more logical for your players and your game masters is a win across the table. This thing was like 78 cents or something like that. So I snapped that up quick. Beyond that, I grabbed a whole bunch of adventure modules called A Small Problem, Call of the Shadow Prince, Catalog of Calamity, which is a 4-part module set, Caverns of the Merfolk, Journey into the Realms, Lair of Elia Crimalicos, which is a scenario where a tribe of Aarakocra are vying for control over their Mountain Spire home versus a dragon threat, which I'm looking forward to. One called the R.A. Salvatore Presents The Vile Crypt of the Reawakened Sisterhood. This is an adventure module that actually was the advent of a table game hosted by R.A. Salvatore himself. R.A. Salvatore is the author and the proprietor of the Drizzt Do'Urden, the Companions series. So a lot of things that you see written around Drizzt and Catti-brie and Brunar Battlehammer and all of those great heroic icons of the Forgotten Realms came from the brilliant mind of R.A. Salvatore. And this is a set or a series of content pieces written by players at his table that have tested that content in his home game. Kind of a neat little story there. The Grave of the Purple Worm, The Lady of Trollskull Priory, The Wizard's Tower, Temple of the Spider, The Claw of Winter, Winds of Midwinter, The Knife Hall Thieves of Duskin, which was just featured on the DM's Guild Creator Showcase, 100 Bard Songs, which is a fun little compendium that just is a random table of 100 songs, the titles and what the songs are about for bards to kind of bring into roleplay at the table. I thought it was fun. Probably a gift for my wife and her Bard China in our long-running D&D actual play, the Charisma Check podcast. Shameless plug. But it's my show, so I'm going to do that. The five temples of the Earth Mother, Part 1, Life and Moon. You have to be able to say it before you can play it. The Leviathan's Tomb, Battle for the Undercity, Temple of the Nightbringers, and Waterdeep City Encounters. The latter, Waterdeep City Encounters, is actually a DM Guild Adept collaboration. DM's Guild Adepts are hand-selected authors who've done particularly well on the platform, who are then engaged by Wizards of the Coast to produce official tertiary content to support their official storylines, like Rise of Tiamat, or as rather Tyranny of Dragons, Curse of Strahd, Tomb of Annihilation, Waterdeep Dragon Heist and the Mad Mage, Dungeon of the Mad Mage, all that good stuff. So yeah, it was a really good time on there. I had a blast going through DM's Guild, really experiencing all the great things that these three third-party creators have to offer. And with $50 US, I picked up 21 items. I'm so excited to dive into them and get familiarized and start to bring them into my home games. So you should definitely take a look out there. Even if you take $5 you're going to get a handful of really great content. Like I said, most of these items landed somewhere between like $1 to $2, $3 a piece. And there are way more creators and way more amazing pieces out there than I could ever have time or budget to grab all of. But like I said, I'm not done with it. I will go back there and I will continue to support these amazing community members who put their blood, sweat, and tears and the hours into creating these great adventures and compendiums for our games at the table. So do check them out. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the buying experience on Dungeon Masters Guild, and what I found as a purchaser, and some of the things that I found influenced my opinion in doing so. So hopefully these are things that might be of benefit to those creators out there or people who are looking to publish. This is just my kind of objective opinion on how I approached DM's Guild and what I was kind of looking for in the things that ultimately got my dollar at the end of the day. Like I said, my personal focus for content on DM's Guild is mainly kept to adventure modules, adventure campaigns, lore items, and tools that make my life as a GM easier. So I did not go into anything that was rules or mechanics based or class based or race based or features or anything like that. Anything that affected the rules of the game and how the game plays, I did not go into. I kept strictly focused on adventure modules, campaigns, settings, and the like. So the one call out here is I was a little bit disappointed at how much content has been published. That's really just a loose or thin veiled promotion for someone's stream or content. I think that's a little ulterior. So just calling that out right now. And I'm sure that's got to be a sticking point in the publishing community too. There are a couple of pieces that are just really thinly veiled, kind of slapped together content. And the first page and a half is like an advertisement for someone's stream, like actual play or podcast or something like that. That's a little gross. Folks, if you're doing that, you should stop, because I don't think that's effective, and I don't think it does the creator community justice. So just be mindful of that when you are searching for things on DM's Guild. Good content is good content, and there were a lot of really great content pieces that were tested or came about through a stream, and those are wonderful. What I'm talking about are just the very thinly veiled, like, clearly no effort went into it, and like the focus of the piece is not the piece, but rather showcasing someone's YouTube channel. So that's the distinction I'm making. That said, as I navigated my way through DM's Guild, there are a few things that I found consistent in the pieces that I ultimately opted to buy. And those include the art, cover, and overall visual representation of the piece. Yes, the visuals do matter. So like they say, don't judge a book by its cover. But in this case, I did take the visuals and the art and the overall polish and presentation of the content in consideration. And that was kind of like my first check. If I liked that, that immediately caught my eye. I shouldn't say it was my first check. That immediately caught my eye, but it wasn't the most important part in the buying making decision. For me, the most important part was the synopsis, so the description of what the piece was, and the full preview. So on DM's Guild, there's the option of having a small preview or a full large preview. And the full preview gives you a couple of pages to read through that gives you a sense of what that content piece is like. The stronger these full previews were, the more likely they were to end up in my cart. That, plus the title, plus the presentation of what the content will do for me, and the cover art or the visual art all work together to kind of create my first step. From there, as I was going through the preview and reading things, format, layout, polish, and grammar and spelling. Oh, man. Please, DM's Guild 3P publishing community. I know some of you self-publish from start to finish. Some of you have layout editors and proofreaders. There is no excuse for publishing professional work with spelling errors in it. That is the first thing that causes me to question and brings mistrust into how good I can expect that content to be when the summary or the overview or pages and text in the preview have spelling errors, grammatical errors, words that aren't even words. Like you have to be conscious of that if you're publishing for a public medium and asking people for money for it. Even in a pay what you want or a freemium platform, it's your professional integrity. Please double check, triple check, quadruple check your spelling. I'm not perfect at it, but a lot of my stuff is done for volume and speed. If you're producing professional work, make sure that it is error-free, because that will impact my buying decision if it impacts mine. it's likely to impact someone else's and a majority of people. So grammar, spelling, polish, professionalize it. That's a big part of my buying decision too. In the content itself, I like to see thorough descriptions for locations. So if it is an adventure module or something like that, thorough locations, descriptions, and sidebar descriptions like that I can narrate to the players. A lot of producers did a really great job of that. So they have a description of the location, what it's like. They have a really in-depth, great map guide for encounter scenarios like that. They have great sidebars for you to, that little piece that says read or paraphrase these to your players. Really great kind of blown out descriptive narrative there. What I'm doing with these is I want to take some of the heavy lifting off me as a game master, and that includes writing my own descriptions, which I typically do, and I usually will do anyway. But the more robust, clear, and thorough and descriptive those sidebar narrative panels are, the less I have to retreat it or retool it for my own style. So that's a great quality of life improvement to me that often made the difference between what went in my cart and what stayed on the shelf. To that end, anything that I could see that makes my life easier as a GM, that also got my heart in deciding what to buy. So when you're writing, know your audience, right? We always say in content creation to know your audience. Make sure that when you're writing for the GM, because eventually if it's if it's an adventure piece or a module or a tool for GMs, and that is your audience, right? Think about how does this make a GM's life easier, and how easy is it to integrate with any existing campaign? So if it's system agnostic or at least campaign setting agnostic, you're going to allow a lot more flexibility for GMs to use your content. And then you want to make it as easy as possible. You want to answer the questions they have before they have to ask them. And that's going to make your product a lot stronger too. Clear outlines and multiple story path options in adventure modules were important to me, but not critical. This was a nice to have. So if something is outlined in a campaign or adventure and the players don't go that way, I'm perfectly capable and adept with managing and adjusting the story based on whatever route they choose. But that's not the case for everybody. And I also enjoy having that laid out to me from time to time. So having multiple story options, there were a couple that had a really great like if then scenario. So if you have your main storyline in the way that it's kind of intended to roll out, but then there was like, if the characters do that, then this, or here are some other options that can happen based on your players' decisions. So having those kind of multiple arcs and storylines and branches considered, even if just for the first few steps into those other, let's say, alternate paths, was a big plus and a big benefit to me as a GM and a consumer. Like I said, for tools, the overall quality of life improvement, does this answer a challenge that I have at the table, or is it just content for content's sake? Like the activity tracker, immediately I can attach that utility to a question I always get from my players. So think about the questions that your players are always asking or always struggling with, and then answer that question for DMs when you produce tools to help them at the table. I think that'll make them for a much stronger project too. Keeping things not too setting specific. Granted, we should all be at least a little bit imaginative in our play of Dungeons and Dragons, but if you can avoid making things too specific, like there were a couple of pieces that were great, but they were core Eberron, and if you took them out of Eberron, they didn't make sense. So they speak to like dragon houses and specific cultural events in Eberron and things that were tied to specific mechanics that are Eberron exclusive. That meant that it was either impossible or at least very difficult for me to port that into my campaign, which could be my own world or Forgotten Realms or Ravenloft or something like that. So if you're creating a tool or an adventure module or a campaign that you want to have more broad appeal, try to make it as setting agnostic as possible. It's okay to use something as a baseline, like you can set it in Eberron, but always make sure that there are options for GMs to pull it out of that environment without completely undoing the fabric of the entire piece. And then finally, and I do mean finally, I came down to ratings and price. I know this is tricky, but the reality is in a digital environment where we're making purchases online, ratings and reviews are important. I know that's really tough because it tends to be exclusive for or exclusive to big producers, and really make things an exponentially uphill climb for new producers to the scene because you don't have a big following, you don't have a lot of people purchasing your products, you don't have a lot of ratings. But a lot of cases, 1 or 2 ratings netting a 5-star review, even if it's a couple of friends who can look at it and give you some objective, honest feedback, is helpful. So go out there, do the heavy lifting, curate 10 to 15 reviews from people you know. give your stuff to content creators. I know I'm not a fan of the work for free, but it really isn't. I mean, advertising costs money. So if you're able to provide your content to a reviewer or a personality or somebody who creates content does have that following, you're not giving your content away for free. I want to be very clear about that. You're giving your content as a very small, modest cost to you to access those audiences that you don't have. So that's the trade-off, right? It's not the same as asking a band to play for free or get paid in exposure or any of that crap. Right? It's not using an artist's license without crediting them. It's not. This is a quid pro quo that could be really beneficial for you. So get your stuff out there, curate some reviews, get some quote snippets, and do the promotion. Typically, my rule for content, and I'll share this with a lot of people ask me about my social grouping, like social marketing. One of the biggest tenets that I take is you should spend at least 3 times the amount of time promoting your content as you spend creating the content. And yes, it's a ton of work. So. And then, of course, price wasn't really a big thing because, honestly, I will tell you straight up, there was nothing on DM's Guild that I felt was overpriced. Nothing. Not a single thing. I did not see, like, anything on there that was over the top, out of this world expensive. Like I said, most of the great stuff I grabbed was between $1 and $4 a piece. Easily well worth it. You think about the hours that these creators put into this content, and some of the bigger, more robust things were maybe $30, $33. I tend to compare this to the cost of a video game, which might last me a couple of weeks, and I know damn well that out of all this content, I'm going to get hours and hours and hours and days of content out of it. So that is really a quick inside look on my experience with DM's Guild, the types of things that influenced my buying decision, and overall, it was a really great experience. I encourage you and anyone and everyone to take a minute, go to DM's Guild this week. Play It Forward is on until May 17th, during which your favorite creators will get 100% of your hard-earned cash in return for their hard work on this great content that's going to bring culture, excitement, enjoyment, and hours of entertainment to you and your table. So do it up. And that is a wrap for the Speaking Common news this week. It is Saturday. Again, I have to cheat because quarantine reasons and no one's watching the calendar these days. It is Saturday, May 19th. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Of course, stay tuned for the podcast. And until next time, happy gaming. Be good to one another. We'll see you right here for another Speaking Common next week. See you soon. And thank you all for sticking around. That's the live recording of the Speaking Common newscast. Of course, when I'm going through the newscast, I don't get to interact the way that I would like to. So I will take the time to go back over chat. We have a lot of really great back and forth. Thanks, everybody. Good analogy. Take 20 on the yes, that was I'm blanking out. The curse, the D&D Beyond versus Wizards of the Coast ownership thing. I saw that come up when I said it. No, I couldn't recall it, but got a great website. Nice. Is that that's for Nerdy Chicken, I think, right? nerdychicken.ca, by the way. A trove of curiosity for the nerdy and the nerd-oriented. Some amazing stuff on there, too. Yeah, my budget went boom pretty quick. If they're too lazy to use a spell checker or have a couple people proofread it, that's just shoddy work. Absolutely. Yeah, like I can't stress that enough. The spelling errors that I saw on there. When I purchase something and I see it riddled with spelling errors, I like immediately it pulls into question, right, the quality and the validity of the rest of the work. Like if it's 150 pages, it's all original artwork versus stock images in 10 pages. How to price them so a creator's getting fair compensation. The players aren't being skewered on price. And the creator's work sells. Yeah, exactly. It's a fine balance, right? It is a fine balance because everything has a production cost. I've looked into producing. I've looked in and am looking into producing stuff on DM's Guild myself, and I know that like even if I were to do it myself from start to finish, there's an opportunity cost, right? There's a cost of my time, and then of course, like I said, I want it to look good. I want it to have visual art. And I want those artists to be paid. So even a cheap artist or a good artist that is running a lower price comp on that work can still be, you're still like $400 or $500 out of pocket, right? And as is the case with these higher price modules, I'm not saying that the work isn't worth that, That's not the case. That has nothing to do with it. It really comes down to like what I have to pay, right? There's a bit of a misnomer there too, and it tends to result in some conflict in the community where just because somebody doesn't want to pay what you are charging doesn't mean that your work is not worth what you're charging, right? There is autonomy on both sides of that, right? The consumer gets to decide what they want to pay, and the producer gets to decide what they want to charge. A good producer and good market placement means that you, as a content producer, has found the happy medium that lives between what your audience is willing to pay and what you're willing to accept for your work. It really comes down to that. A lot of people get that mixed up and take it personally and get a little defensive over that, and I don't think it's necessarily helpful. Curious to how many of these authors are calculating the pricing on some of these work. I guarantee you a lot of people are just pulling an abstract number because they're like, I think this is what it's worth because that's what it's worth to me, right? But you're not your own audience. You're not, right? You go out in the world and you might find that like 98% of the people who've seen your content don't want to pay the $20 you think it's worth, but they will pay the $2. The other dichotomy we see there too is like typically when you put something up for free or $0 or pay what you can specifically, many people will opt to pay $0. And if that's an option, right? When I had pay what you can options, I either paid the suggested price that they had or I paid $1 at least. All the DMs Guild authors, I know, usually just try to break even. Oh, Big Booty. Yeah, that's a terrible business model for a career creator anyhow. Breaking even doesn't help an author advance their work, produce. Yeah, that's true. You don't want to split the difference too much, but I do see the especially new creators. I do see that Big Booty. I mean, if you Big Booty, welcome to the chat, by the way. Good to see you. If you are a new creator, sometimes you have to take the hit on your margin to get your stuff out there. That's just the way that market works. Oh yeah, don't know any career creators on DM's Guild, only hobbyists. Yeah, and I wonder, I'm sure there's a little bit of a counterculture there too, because of the fluidity and the freedom of the model, it makes it very accessible to hobbyist creators. And I love that because I am that, right? But I'm sure there's a little bit of, you have to volunteer the respect for the career creators while you're in that realm, because I imagine that it would be heartbreaking and pretty difficult to see like hobbyist creators flood the market with free stuff while you're trying to, pay your bills by producing really great content. That said, I'm sure there are a lot of hobbyist creators who produce things at a very modest price that are tremendously wonderful content. And I saw a lot of that this week. So sure, there must be a strategy to pricing someone already established in the community. I'm sure there is. That's a good question, actually. Call from the Deep, $39.95 US. I thought it was up for. It's also on sale right now, right? Yeah, it's $31.96. Am I still in Canadian? I'm not going to fall back into that trap. And so I did. So $31.96 US right now. So it's on sale. A lot of these things are. Oh yeah, that's another thing I didn't even mention. During Play It Forward, a lot of this stuff is marked down by 20% additionally. So, Call from the Depp. Well, it sounds like a very good adventure to me. That's my best Johnny Depp. That's the best Johnny Depp you're getting out of me. Great show. Thank you. Thanks, Venom. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. Love it. Thanks for the show. Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, guys. That's a big part of it. I mean, we're going to continue, of course. That's just my sign off for the podcast. I'm still going till like 2 at least. Analogy of the buying of a PlayStation game and thing oh yes, that's right. Yeah. Thank you. I knew it at the time when I saw it. It was the analogy of buying a game for PlayStation, thinking you should get the Xbox version as well. That is the analogy we use for folks who felt like by buying a hard copy cover of the Player's Handbook, they should also get a D&D Beyond coupon. Offering free or underpriced stuff cheapens the work of the community. Yeah, exactly, Pleasant. And you have to be careful of undercutting, too, in that regard, right? Like, it's a big slap in the face, and it's a fire starter. Charge what you're worth, but price for the market, right? Large amount of content. The interior work is beautiful. Oh, yes, in in Call of the Deep or Call from the Deep. Yeah, I'm excited about that one. I'm thinking about that one actually to do something more with. I really like the idea of it, and I love that it's a third party creator. JVC Perry, of course, has done a ton of really great work. You can see on his page if you go to visit it. There's just, it's awesome. There's a ton of stuff he's done, and he is also very generous in his work with the community. He does a lot of collaboration. Has an awful lot of stuff out there. Who amongst you have made purchases on the DMs Guild? Pleasant Doom got to bail, make a grocery list later. Yes, Pleasant Doom, go get those groceries. Like I said, geeks got to eat, right? Have a great day. Enjoy. And we'll see you next time, Pleasant. Pleasant Doom, of course, playing Glitter Bomb on our bi-weekly DMs Guild feature showcase of Scourge of the Nightingale. Moving in the next segment of the show, we're gonna start to produce some of the content that I built for social, and a couple of new series that I launched last week that I'm really kind of happy with. So I'm happy to share with y'all. And of course, this part, I'll kind of say a piece, throw out a conversation starter. We'll go back and forth on it. This is designed to be a little bit more casual, a little more interactive. So let's start with a question that I will pose the community as we go through this. Is your D&D campaign more comedic and lulls driven, or are you more high fantasy and drama? A little bit of both? What do you prefer? Personally, my style of campaign is usually high drama, very fantasy, very story driven, mystique, but I surround myself with funny people, so there are always those great comedic moments as well. For me, it's a good mixture of both, but I would have to say it's about 75% drama, fantasy, narrative driven, and the other 25% in general shenanigans and laughs around the table. What about you guys? You go for the funny or you go for the drama? A little bit of both? Different for each setting? Big Booty, I bought a couple. Nice. What'd you grab? What'd you pick up? Ultra Venom, yeah, I'm going to be doing some digit painting. I saw legit. I'm doing some legit painting. I'm sure it's that also. I'm sure it's also legit. Legit digital painting. Kelly, 80% fantasy, 20% shenanigans. Solid mix, too. Sorry, I got to eat, too. I don't want to be hangry on stream, so I got to eat my bagel. It's impossible to keep the hilarious out of this group sometimes, and I love it. And why would you? I love like jokes and fun and funny around the table. We're going to talk about that a little bit actually in Rule Solution coming up. But it's actually in the PHB. They actually call out that like moments of laughter and fun will happen around the table, and that's true. Like it's no D&D game should be so serious that you're just like always, in it all the time. Certain systems don't lend to that. I mean, there are not many like comic improv actor Call of Cthulhu actual play streams. There's a niche. Kelly, grab Take 20 and the J-Man team, and that's going to be our niche, our collaborative niche when we partner. It's going to be high comedy improv Call of Cthulhu. What do you think? Don't steal our ideas, Twitter. We've streamed Palladium Rifts game every other Tuesday. Nice. Palladium had so many systems out back in the day, huh? And the humor factor is high. Very nice. Dana, I'm finally able to communicate. I had to break the mute spell in my web browser. Yes, welcome. We appreciate and require your voice, so thank you for joining us. You are now seen, no longer invisible, no longer sheltered, muted, held back by the internets. Dana has broken through, and Dana will not be denied. Not today, not any day. Like it's surreal and satirical, the COC idea? Okay, let's do it. Let's get on that. Another one on the record. History is being made. destinies defined here on the Speaking Common Saturday streaming podcast. Stick around for more. How do you encourage good listening skills at your table? One of my tenets, this is something that I usually, or tenets, one of my tenets, this is something I usually cover off in session 0 is a focus on those listening skills. D&D is exciting. The story is going to be tremendous engagement, and everyone is going to want a piece of that action. But it requires special skills to be able to listen to the action around the table. Even when it's not your turn and the spotlight's not shining on you, tune into other people's discussions and stories because they're going to be amazing, and you might pick up something that might be of value to your character too. Listening skills are all important at the table. Your back phone, you go get it. Go do it. Listening is important. Yes, I agree. It always comes to a point where, people want to talk. A lot of people get excited. They want to talk over one another, but it's important to also be generous and give that space over to your fellow players too, right? What are you going to think? Right? Let's do a little Twitter action here. Give me a quick sec here, folks. I'm going to type up something real quick. Yeah, there we go. Who's rolling dice this week? Who's playing games? Be it the Dungeons and or the Dragons, or any of your favorite video games, board games. You guys playing board games as well? I like board games. I obviously I have way more games and gaming opportunities than I have time to actually play them, but I do like board games a lot. Makes up a big chunk of what I do. The info being dispersed can make all the difference in winning the game. Absolutely. Absolutely. In any game, really, right? Yeah, you never know when you might pick something up. You might pick up a little tidbit of information, a little secret here and there. Something that could save your party as well, right? You never know. You just never can tell. You know what I'm saying? All right, we're gonna do a little tweeters here. See if we can get some other folks. We can rally the troops, so to speak. All right. Let me choose. An image. There we go. Get this queued up. So, gang, bear with me. Yeah. Another question I want to pose to our wonderful community. What role, if any, does religion play and faith play in your game? This is one that it's not always a focus in every campaign, but there are a lot of settings or a lot of arcs where deities and faith-based systems do feature. For me personally, it tends to be driven by the players. It's not something that I frequently bring into my games for no reason other than I just am occupied with a million other things that are happening in my campaign. But when I have clerics who are focused on it, or holy warriors who are committed to a deity, I always make sure to be cognizant of the faith-based systems that they're bringing in as players, and that I utilize those in the backstory and the arcs that I'm producing in the campaign. So yeah, what importance, if any, does religion or faith-based systems have for you? It's always been a pretty big pillar of RPGs, particularly fantasy-based RPGs, right? You might not see it in that iteration in things like Cyberpunk, but it's always had some kind of part to play in RPGs, it seems. There are entire compendiums and entire sections that are devoted to it in D&D. I just have never really gone that far into it. Honestly, it's just one more system for me to memorize or try to get a hold of. So I haven't really gone there personally. It depends. Depends on what. Yeah, I used to play Paladins exclusively, and in second edition AD&D, Paladins were much more faith heavy. So their powers and even the types and then the kinds of effects that they were capable of had a tendency to be anchored to their faith. So faith and religion was far more intrinsically involved in earlier versions of D&D from what I've seen than they are in like 5e and earlier, more current versions of most fantasy TTRPGs. I don't know if it's the same for Pathfinder, because I've never played it, but I don't know if anybody knows Pathfinder, if you can speak to that or correct it. I'm not turning this into a social eating stream. I just don't want to be hangry. Lore, class, race, origins of the character. Mm-hmm. So do you find in your experience, Dana, that it tends to be more character driven rather than DM driven? I mean, I guess it depends on the DM, depends on the setting, right? Like there are certain settings and homebrew worlds where deities are a huge part of the evolution of those worlds. So that's obviously going to change depending on who you talk to. Yeah, nice. Another question I'd like to pose to the community. Have you ever played a DM's Guild published adventure or campaign? So with a lot of the conversation around DM's Guild this week, of course, have you ever played a DM's Guild published adventure or campaign? If so, what was it and what was your experience? Me personally, I can now officially say that I am. I have previously played Adventurers League modules, but if we're talking about third-party content creators, of course, now we have the DM's Guild Feature Showcase, which is running Scourge of the Nightingale by Jeff Stevens and JVC Parry. And that's been a really great experience so far. So I am, that's it, and I intend to do much, much more in the near future. You have, Dana? Nice. What did you play? Yeah, I loved it. There's so many great options out there. It's a lot of fun. And you can find a lot of modules for those modules that might not exist in official capacity. You know, I know a lot of people are looking for Spelljammer, a lot of people looking for Dark Sun. And while those haven't been officially released for 5e, there are a lot of really great third-party options that can get you there, right? So you could do it. There's nothing stopping you. Not yet, you haven't? Nice. Have you ever been on DM's Guild? Yeah, we just popped up a whole lot of good stuff from DM's Guild. Yeah, I had a ton of yeah, a ton of really great experience that I just or ton of really great content that I just picked up for $50. I got 21 pieces for $50. It was pretty amazing. Give me a quick second here. Excuse me. Sage advice unfurled. Sorry, we're gonna go through more of these questions, some prompts for the community, and then we're actually gonna get into recording 2 new series. One is called D&D Rule Solution, where we're going through some of the more unexplored corners of the rule set of Dungeons and Dragons. We're also going to talk about Sage Advice Unfurled. We're going to record that segment, which is a deeper dive into the Sage Advice Compendium and some of the more hotly contested rules and mechanics in Dungeons and Dragons for this week. So I'm just preparing some stuff for that. Dana, you plan to? Yeah, but the guys you play with now are new to the game. Gotcha. So you're trying to get everyone you play up to par? Yeah. Trying to introduce some new players. That's awesome. Definitely noble. It's always a good time. So what are you playing with them, with the new players specifically? They're just starting out, so you're starting with the latest version? The latest version of D&D, like D&D 5e? Should say the latest edition. Gotcha. So you're playing 5th edition D&D? And what about yourself? Are you? I can't remember if you said this or not last week. If you're new to it as well, or new to 5e, 5th edition 5e, yeah. Another question for the community I would like to pose is, who is or are your favorite DMs Guild publisher? If you have, or publishers, if you have experienced DMs Guild content or third-party Dungeons and Dragons content before, who do you really like out there who's creating great things in the space? I've experienced a lot of really great ones, particularly over this week in my exploration of DMs Guild during the Play It Forward campaign, and there are a lot of wonderful folks out there, special call outs to Steve Fiddler, JVC Perry, and Jeff Stevens. We have the whole Uncaged anthology of authors. Steve Bissett, who is a great, hardworking creator at Pangalactic, who's done a lot of really great pieces, including the award-winning Bullet Storm. Great play on words and even better little module. So check them out and tell me who you've seen that you really like out there in the DMs Guild or other places where great third-party content is shared and created. And if you don't, that's fine. You should check out some of those cats. They're doing really great things out there. You can find everything from complete campaign modules to small modules in the campaign of your campaign setting of your choosing that you can very easily port into your home game or mold for your own campaign too. So very easy to kind of make things malleable, I would say, in that regard, which is pretty cool. Another kind of cool prompt I'd like to throw out to the community in these conversation starters is this. My favorite way to kick off a campaign is with, in, or by what? We always talk a little bit about campaign starters and maybe even either avoiding or leaning heavily into the you meet in a tavern trope. Me particularly, I've leaned more into using my character backstories and their origins to build what I call a campaign intro or origin. And these are little micro stories that are intrinsically woven from characters' backstories that they submit that eventually bring them in together. And sometimes there's crossover between characters, and I'll write a little scenario for each one of them that ultimately lead to them coming to a head where the campaign kicks off. So that might be a blacksmith and a bounty hunter whose paths are somehow crossed just before the moment where the first scene takes place. It might be somebody sitting at a bar, maybe investigating something, a murder, a missing person, and it might be somebody simply cruising the bounty board in your local village looking for adventure. Either way you decide to do it, it's important to have a good, solid introduction to kick off any good campaign so your characters can feel more woven into the fabric of the story you're all about to tell. Yeah, you should. They're really good. They're also all outlined on my my website at shambazelgames.com. I wrote a big article about it yesterday. For the $50 budget, I went into everything I bought and outlined some of my favorite authors. So it might be a good place to start if you want to check that out. I'll see if I don't know, can I post links in my own channel? I've disabled links right now, but let's see. Did that work? I don't know if that worked or not. Oh, it did. I guess it stands to reason that I should be able to post links in my own channel. Here's the actual article. I'll pull it up here. But by all means, feel free to pop on there. There's lots of content. I would say great content, but I'm clearly biased, right? It's my content, so you don't have to take my word for it. Go ahead and check it out. Take a look. There's the actual article where I took that $50 budget, and I went ahead and I jumped in to buy those pieces that I found on DM's Guild yesterday. So very modest budget. Wasn't a lot. Like I said, I wanted to keep it to a good bit less than I would pay for a video game, knowing that I'm going to get way more hours out of this content than I ever would from any video game. Well, almost any video game. Yeah. Here's one for you, Dana. If I could teach or introduce any one person to Dungeons and Dragons, it would be, who would you teach or who would you choose to introduce to your chosen hobby? This is a tough one for me. I feel like I want to play D&D with everyone, but in a weird way, I wish I could teach or introduce my family to Dungeons and Dragons so they could have an appreciation for what I do. I think that would be cool. But yeah, I think that's a big one. I think I see a lot of great stories from our community members who get to play Dungeons and Dragons with their family. I play with my wife, which is wonderful. She's brilliant and super supportive of it and has a great time doing it. But I wish like my extended family would encounter it or enjoy it. The other one, a close second or maybe even a close tie for that, would be my original D&D crew. So all of my old gang that I grew up with in St. John's, I would love to sit around the table with those crew again for one session. Maybe we might even make that happen in the future. I know they'd be down for it. But the gang that I used to play with back in the 80s in various people's homes over many summers, I would love to get together for a small campaign or one shot with that crew again because I love you. And it's more fun now than ever. George Lucas Dana. George Lucas Dana. Awesome choice. Yeah, that would be interesting. George Lucas. That's a great call out, actually. Some of these great like Hollywood creatives, I bet they'd make amazing players. I sort of started to ship you with George Lucas for some reason. I don't know why. Danorge Mercus. Yeah, George Lucas. That'd be good. Steven Spielberg, J.J. Abrams. What about actors? What actors would you like to play D&D with? I feel like actors / performers do a great job. I would actually skip the film actors and go straight for the stage actors like Patrick Stewart. I'd love to play D&D with Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Anthony Hopkins, Tom Hanks, and Christopher Walken. What a sick table would that be? Some of the classically trained stage actors and actresses. Who else? Judi Dench. The late Carrie Fisher. Mad Love. Who else would I like to play D&D with? So many good options. I think stage actors have it for me though. Like the theatrical performers I would like to play very much with. Here's one for you. My favorite subclass class combo is what? Paired with what? As we know, D&D 5e and most other iterations of D&D give us tons of tools to diversify and customize through multi-class and subclass options. So what's your favorite class, subclass option, combination of both? If I'm going to go multi-class, I have a tendency to go with some form of fighter and some form of something else. I just can't get away from those first 2 or 3 levels of fighter. They're so powerful with things like action surge, second wind, and of course the martial prowess between weapons and armors proficiencies. I would like to do usually something like that, and then something like I'm not going to say warlock, but let's say anything that complements that power set. What do you like to mix? The warlock trope, the 2 levels of warlock trope, I'm a little over. I don't tend to lean into that. Here's another one I would throw out to you. I spend at least how many hours on D&D each week? If you're one of the fortunate few who spends more than 3 hours a week, then power to you. Me personally, well, I create D&D content every day, so I would say I spend upwards of about 25 to 30 hours a week on D&D, but not that much time playing. I unfortunately only spend about 3 to maybe 6 hours playing a week, which is actually not that bad. It's more than I've typically gotten. So I'd say for me, probably between 3 to 6 hours a week playing Dungeons and Dragons. And the rest of all the hours of the week thinking about Dungeons and Dragons and food. I think about food. Ultra Venom, welcome back. Currently about 20 to 30 hours, including writing. Yeah, that's the key. Like, if we include all the other stuff that's D&D related, that's where I pick up steam too. 7 to 10 hours playing, though, that is enviable too. And then 8 to 10 hours of work on top of that. Yeah. So you run games, right? Right, Kelly? You DM games, right? So let me ask you, as a fellow GM, roughly, I know this is a really kind of tough thing to ask and harder thing to nail down, but roughly how many hours of prep do you put into each hour of game? So like for each hour of play, about how many hours of prep do you think goes into it for you? For me, I would say like 3 hours of prep for each hour of gameplay, if I were to put it to a ratio. But that 3 hours of prep can easily go to 6, including like map making and whether it's building things in Roll20 or painting miniatures for my table game. Play every other Tuesday and Thursday. About 8 to 20 hours prep for each week. For the 7 to 10 hours playing. So it's like 1 to 2 hours per hour of gameplay. About is that fair? Would you say? But in turning everything you create into campaigns into module publishable content. Nice. That's what we were talking about earlier. Like, I'm all about using streaming content and play content, whatever it is, to produce published content. That's a yes. Producing thinly veiled shit content to try and get people to subscribe to your YouTube channel, that's a no. That's a good example, Kelly, to help me like differentiate between that, because I don't want it to be misconstrued that I'm saying like there should be no crossover in the two. Just like Kelly, Ultra Venom 74 and the Take 20 D&D crew are doing. If you're playing, streaming and playing actual play campaigns is a wonderful place to play test your content. Absolutely. Plus, you get a little bit of promotion in there as well, right? But the streaming and the production of it, the content of it to produce your published content should flow that way, not the other. The published content shouldn't be promotion for your streams. And I was really, really disappointed when I saw that on DM's Guild. Fortunately, I think I may have said there are a lot of cases, but there wasn't a lot of that. It's just when I did run into it, my heart sank a little bit because I get excited for like, oh, this sounds like a cool title, sounds like a cool concept. Then I get into the content, and literally like the first like 2 columns of text were about this person's like social media and join me, follow me, click subscribe. It's like, fuck off, like piss off, get out of here with that shit. That's always been my approach to social content and content development is I don't do things to get people to do things. I do things because I want people to use things. Right? I either want to entertain, inform, educate, provide tools, provide insight. People will subscribe if you produce interesting content. Exactly. Too many people go at it with a sense of entitlement, like I'm here, therefore you should watch me. And they focus too much on that. They focus too much on those numbers rather than focus on the quality of the content. The numbers will come with the quality of content, not the other way around. You don't wait until you get the numbers before you start producing good content, because you'll never win that circle. Never. Nor should you. Like, why should people watch you? Why should people talk to you? What do you do? Like, what do you offer, right? Take 20 offers tons of great gaming, a really great, genuine, organic experience around the table that can make you feel like you're sitting there with some of your buds. That's what they offer. Good minds and good folks, too. I'm not just, not just propping you up there. Not just filling your sails with wind, so to speak. That's a PG-13 version or PG version. People also advertise if you produce quality content. Yeah, word of mouth. Word of mouth. Quality or quantity. Yeah, I think you should have both. But never one over the other. Never quantity over quality, I should say. It's perfectly fine to produce less content of a higher quality, but if you're just pumping stuff out there for the sake of pumping it out there, you got to ask, like, what do I expect this to do for me? I mean, sometimes I just produce content that's just like a status update. It might be, picture your breakfast or something like that. That's okay too. It still serves a purpose. It doesn't all have to be like, earth-shattering, life-changing content. But you can't go out there with a sense of entitlement, I guess. It's a better way to say it. Word of mouth means so much more than people think in a digital age. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much content out there. People don't have a lot of time. That combination means that folks aren't like browsing as much as they would have or used to. So you need advocates, right? You need to inspire people with your content to the point where they're inspired to go out and share it. Or they're inspired to come in and stay and then return, right? And you're never going to please everyone. Amen to that. Just produce what you enjoy, and guaranteed others out there somewhere will likely enjoy it too. Absolutely. There are two great tenets that come from that Take 20. There is the tenet that there's a niche for everything. So I work in digital marketing. This is what I do for a living. And a big crux that I've seen that plays in any organization or nonprofit, large, small, it doesn't matter. And the same rule applies to content creators in our community. Whatever you do, the more content that floods the market, the more opportunity there is to concentrate. So here's what I mean. Back when no one was streaming D&D content, you could be a D&D content streamer and that was your niche. And honestly, when I first started in streaming, that kind of was a bit of a niche for me. There was not a lot of people streaming in the D&D content category. It was Critical Role, it was Maze Arcana, it was Hyper RPG, it was It Me JP in their series. It was, a lot of other what now we would say are big names. Even D&D even Wizards was not in the streaming sphere when I started streaming D&D into the category. At that time, the pool was thin enough that D&D could be your niche. Now, go ahead, check out the category, and then come right back to my channel. You'll see there's a ton of D&D streamers. There's tons of D&D streamers. So that means you have to concentrate the niche a little bit more. So now your niche might be game prep. It might be DM chat. It might be actual play. So as the pools become more rich with content is the play way to say it. We have more people kind of pumping content into a niche. Then that niche, and from its niche for my American friends, just to cover that off, then you have to concentrate down again. So if you have an actual play, then what does your actual play do? And if that becomes bloated, for lack of a better word, then you have to niche down again, right? Maybe your niche now is Pathfinder, or maybe you need to move into Star Wars, or maybe you do a little bit of both, or maybe you focus on DM's Guild creators. When that becomes bloated, like that's exactly the path I took. I went D&D. I went into DM chat, back and forth interactive, more community-driven stuff. I did an actual play, but my actual play is focused on DM's Guild. When DM's Guild becomes bloated, I'll drill down in another niche, and I already know what that path looks like. Sorry, the other tenet that you mentioned, a very important one, is you are never going to please everyone. It's the internet. Everyone has an opinion, everyone has a soapbox, and everybody has an axe to grind. Get out there, do what you love. Be considerate, be a good human. Wheaton's first law, don't be a dick. And you'll be okay with the rest of it. Or maybe your niche is being a dick. That's a thing too, right? Like, look at oh God, what was his name? The comedian saying, I'm an asshole, he's an asshole, what an asshole. Oh my God, I'm so blanking out right now. But his whole shtick was he's a dick, right? He's an asshole comedian. That was his whole shtick. That was his niche. It exists. You could be like D&D's bad boy. There are one person I know who tried to kind of make a thing of that, but he wasn't really, right? If you're going to do it, you have to, you can't just be like, hey, I'm D&D's bad boy, but you're actually a nice guy. You got to pick and choose. Cool to pick the nice guy approach, by the way. It's a very Canadian response. But look at Dr. Disrespect, who's a huge icon in the video game streamosphere. His whole thing was around this like pompy, cocky character. He also had the chops, or has the chops to back it up. He gets away with far too much shit, but that's a Twitch thing, not a Dr. Disrespect thing. But he's found a niche and he's hammered it. Find a niche, hammer it. And don't think there's a way to do it without putting the work in. That's the thing. When a lot of people ask, you know, how do you do this, or why is this working for you, or what are you doing that works? What I can answer those questions all day, but what irritates me is when the subtext is, how do I do this easy? Like, how do I get it easily and quickly? And you can't. And I wouldn't, like, you're not doing it for the right reasons if that's your approach, right? So, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. The beauty of a world with 8 billion people is that even by percentages alone, produce any content and you'll please at least a few thousand of them somewhere. Exactly. Ample opportunity. There is abundance. Just got to be out there and just got to be you. Produce quality content, and those few thousand you find will likely tell 10 others. For sure. Gary Vee is somebody that I follow pretty closely, and I take him with a large grain of salt. He's not right all the time about everything. But that's one of those tenets that comes from there, right? There's abundance. People have this misconception that like there's not enough to go around, right? So people play their cards really close to the chest. I see this on Twitter a lot too. When somebody asks for advice on something and you see 100 likes and 2 comments, that's because 98 other people don't want to share, right? You guys can ask me anything you want about anything I do, and I'll share it with you. Why? Because I don't think that equipping you with my tips hurts me. I think if anything, if you were to take and then start to use use those tips, then it elevates the competition. Then I have to go to the next level, and then I'll share that with you too. That's always been my approach to it, and I feel really good about that. Absolutely true. I've had like Discord conversations with people who found me on Twitter, say like, how did you grow your Twitter audience? Like, how are you doing that? And I'll sit on Discord with them for 30 minutes, 40 minutes and just share whatever they want to know. And then, you know, the other thing that doesn't bother me is because a lot of times then they don't like that answer. So they don't do anything about it because it's work. Like ultimately the end of it all, the answer is work. Like I said, I got a full-time job. I work 50 to 60 hours a week right now, and every other waking minute I have that's not dedicated to my family goes into this. So the other part of that too is if you're doing this, then this has to be something you love to do, because it can't be something you just kind of want to do. You'll find out very quickly if that's true or not. When you start to do and you realize how much work it is, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to say, you know what, I love this enough. It's not that much work for me. It's a lot of work to do, but I enjoy doing it so I can keep going. I don't run out of fuel because I love doing it. Or you're going to say, you know what, there's a lot more than I wanted, and you're going to fall off. And that's okay too. But then that's how you partition the people who continue to do it with the people who just wanted to do it at one point in time. Yeah. And I hope that's honest. I don't want you to like sound like an ass. I hope I'm not like coming off as, you know, I'm not pompous about that. It gets me fired up talking about it because I love it. And I like to help people do it. You know what I mean? Because that helps me do it better. So yeah, it's not totally selfless. Like my ability to share that with people pays me back in my need to do it differently or do it better next time, right? But there are a lot of people out there who, and a lot of people that you know, who will like ride on the backs of those tips and then hold everything into themselves because they're so afraid that like someone's gonna get an edge on them, or you're not in the race you think you're in. Like Kelly just said, there are 8 billion people in the world. There are plenty of people. You will never run out of viewers. If you don't have viewers on your YouTube channel or your Twitch stream, it's not because there's not enough to go around. You just haven't reached them yet. And you're probably not being patient enough. I just like doing what I love to do and feeling the natural gravitation of others finding me in the world and finding others who enjoy the same things. Yeah. It's like like-minded molecules binding into a greater force of overall enjoyment. 100%. My favorite official D&D campaign is what? tell me, what is your favorite official D&D campaign that you've played through? I have a couple. If I had to pick one, by default, I almost have to say Lost Mines of Phandelver. I think it's a really well put together, tight little campaign that introduces people to the hobby and the game beautifully. It's a lot of fun to play. I've run it a couple of times, so I'm familiar. I'm comfortable with it. It's my party piece, if you will. So I'd have to say my favorite official D&D 5e campaign is Lost Mines of Phandelver. But a close cousin to that is probably Curse of Strahd, because I love Ravenloft setting. I love Barovia, and I love that kind of dark gothic horror. Temple of Elemental Evil. Elemental Evil is a popular one too. I don't know it as well, but I imagine that that opinion that I just shared will likely change once I get into more of these. Tomb of Annihilation was a great read. I've never run it, but I've read through it, and it's pretty awesome. Yeah, Elemental Evil, and that is were Princes of the Apocalypse part of Elemental Evil, or vice versa? I did a piece on that last week too. I should know this. Play the original and fell in love with D&D even more. Nice. No, Out of the Abyss I was thinking of. So Elemental Evil is Princes of the Apocalypse, right? And Out of the Abyss is the one that I was confusing it with, which is different. Yeah, I think Princes of the Apocalypse is to what Elemental Evil as Horde of the Dragon Queen is to Tyranny of Dragons. Do I have that right? With that, I am going to see if I can get through stream without losing my voice today, but we're going to move into a new segment. It's something that I introduced this week, but I've just formalized it a little bit. And that segment is where we go a little bit deeper into the unexplored areas of the player's handbook, talking about the rules that are officially produced and how they apply to the game in something we call D&D Rule Solution. And it goes like this. In D&D Rule Solution this week, we're talking about the who's who of D&D, some names you might know and some you don't. In this case, we're talking a little bit about Mike Mearls. Now, this is a little bit contentious because it was just announced actually late in April that Mike Mearls is officially no longer in the same capacity as he was with Wizards of the Coast. But he is the other lead designer on the 5th edition Player's Handbook, of course, Jeremy Crawford being the other part of that duo that we talked about last week. And he is or was the senior manager for the research and design team. He's a regular writer and contributor on the D&D official site with items such as the concept and theory of D&D. And he's also the franchise creative director, or was up until recently, according to his Twitter account. He's still listed as such. At the end of April, like I said, Wizards did allude to the fact that he was confirmed as no longer with the studio, or certainly hasn't worked on Dungeons & Dragons tabletop role-playing game in the last year. And that was confirmed by both Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford himself. But otherwise, still accredited with the design and delivery of the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Player's Handbook, and that's Mike Mearls. Tomb of Annihilation, Dana? Oh yeah, it's a great campaign. I can't wait to play it. I love Chult too. I love the jungle setting. All right. Moving on with D&D Rule Solution, we are exploring the Player's Handbook in detail, and we're going to start with the cover, actually. The beautiful, iconic 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons cover displays a fiery-looking image of a lone armor-clad female battling against a hulking giant with a number of hellhounds in the background, if you look closely. This is actually illustrated by Tyler Jacobson and features King Snor, which is a fire giant who is defending his home and calling these hellhounds into the fray. So in this case, if you think about it, the giant's not the bad guy on that cover. He's just trying to defend the house. King Snor is actually a famous character who featured in many of Gary Gygax's previous adventures, most specifically found in the Hall of the Fire Giant King, which was written by Gygax as a module for 1st edition Dungeons & Dragons. So there's some knowledge for you. Manny boy, thank you very much for the follow. Welcome to the Checkmates. Happy to have you on board. The Truffle Shovel, that's our boy Chunk doing his thing. Thank you very much. Josh, welcome. Welcome. Good to see you, my friend. Love the hat. Thank you. Repping the First Order. That's not my first. This is my first order. No, what is it? Oh, I lost my Kylo Ren. I lost it. You will bow to the First Order. I need a little bit of Vader and a little bit of emo to really land it right. Jacobson's pretty badass. Yeah, quite a talented illustrator for sure. Continuing with D&D rules solution for the week as we explore the nuances of the Player's Handbook. The Player's Handbook, of course, as we mentioned last week, is the first official rule book of Dungeons & Dragons. It has more than 300 pages of said rules, so trust me, no one has it memorized. It's argued by many to be the only book that you need to play, and in fact, even tactically, it is. It does satisfy that. So it has outlines for all original 10-player races, all of their subclasses, all of their sub-races, and of course, 12 complete player classes and their adjacent subclasses. It has backgrounds, origins, gear, statistics, variant and multi-classing rules. It has ability scores, checks, saving throws, and environment effects. It also has tips on adventures, playing and running and designing a campaign. It has spells, magic, and of course their spellcasting mechanics to go with it. And it even includes a basic index of creatures and beasts that are more than enough to create and easily enough to create, plan, and run your first few sessions of Dungeons & Dragons. So you can literally find everything you need in the Player's Handbook to take a campaign from concept to reality, making it really the only book you need. And no other official book can make that claim. So there you go. This is the part of the afternoon where I make less sense. No. Hopefully you guys enjoy that, though. We've got a couple more for you in the D&D rule solution set. And then after I pack these down into one video, too. So this will all be available after. But part of the fun of being here live is you get to see it come together, mistakes and all, and interact with me. So if you're new to the channel, throw me a follow, say hello. I would greatly appreciate your support. Most importantly, be active in chat because that's what we're here for. The back and the forth. The discussion elements. Rules. I love memorizing all of the could-be combinations and usage. Absorb them like a sponge, then rewrite or address any issues. My core copy's got a lot of in-book writing and notes and highlights. Nice. Yeah, that's right. The D&D Biblios. Exactly. And there's another dichotomy there too, right? Like I'm very anti-rules lawyer because I run games and that shit's annoying, but I do like to know the rules as well as I can, right? Just because you enjoy the rules and you get mired in and you like to go deep on the mechanics doesn't mean that you're pro rules lawyer, right? Josh, right? Random, as a relatively new DM to 5th edition, I've abolished the lucky feat altogether. Really? Really, Kelly? Why? So lucky, for context, if you're not familiar with it, is a feat that you can select at 4th level or any level where you would get an ability score update or upgrade. And it lets you re-roll 3 basically D20 rolls per day. So you can basically give yourself advantage on any D20 roll 3 times per long rest per day. 2 OP, 2 unbalanced. Interesting. I've had a player who took lucky religiously almost. It was always part of every build, and it didn't. Maybe he just had such terrible luck that even lucky couldn't help him. But I didn't find it didn't really bug him. Maybe 1 per long rest, but not 3. Crazy. Yeah. Fair. I've never really had it imbalance things, but again, like I said, he just rolled habitually terribly, so maybe I didn't notice it that well. I can totally see though it being irritating if yeah, I agree with you. You make a good point. I think maybe 3 is a bit much. What's going to make that different is how frequently you find your players into a long rest, right? Because if you think about it, and I'm on the former side of this, if your players are typically getting a long rest every session, right? At the end of every session, they get some kind of long rest. then effectively the character with Lucky gets to give him or herself inspiration 3 times per session, and that is a lot. But if your characters are in a dungeon that spans like 3 sessions before they can hope to get a long rest, then those 3, they might really have to ration that. So that's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, I was just reading it. I can see all kinds of ways for it to tip the scales on pivotal enemies. Yeah, dramatically. Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. You make a good point there. That way you can create in that space a modifier, not use core info. It gives you creative context. Josh, yeah, when you're understanding the rules. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that more too, and why the rules are important, and why an adherence and respect for the rules does not make you a rules lawyer. Forcing the rules down people's throat like a pompous tool is what makes you a rules lawyer. Yeah, very nice. All right, with another installment of D&D Rules Solution. How is D&D actually subscribed in the player's... Sorry, I'm going to start that one again. In another installment of D&D Rules Solution this week, we're talking about how D&D is actually described in the 5th edition Player's Handbook. There are many differing and varied ways or opinions on how to play the game, and of course, no approach is really wrong unless it hurts your players and the people around your table. My personal approach is always that Dungeons & Dragons is about collaborative storytelling. You gather together with friends to create a narrative and an epic, awesome story. But from the Player's Handbook itself, playing D&D is an exercise in collaborative creation, so it validates that a little bit. You and your friends create epic stories filled with tension and memorable drama. You create silly in-jokes that make you laugh years later. The dice will be cruel to you, but you will soldier on, and your collaborative creativity will build stories that you will tell again and again. Does that not sound like the game that you've experienced? It does for me, almost to a T. And that's directly from the PHP. It's actually written in the preface. What do you guys think? Does that sound like your experience playing at D&D? I think what usually tends to fall to contest is the idea of whether it's a collaborative narrative or if it's like a competitive game. And that really depends on the GM, the game style that you're involved in. Absolutely, balance is best. That can be different at each table. Yeah, of course. It's the stories that bind us. I love that statement. And create rules. You create rules and mechanics to promote that creative space and consistently support it, not control it. Yeah. Yeah, sounds about right. Collaborative narrative, 100%. All right. 3 for 3 on story. I love it. Wrapping up a D&D rule solution this week, I'm looking at great tips that are pulled from the first page of the D&D 5e Player's Handbook. These are actual tips for the game that are right there in the text. So, number 1, you don't need to memorize the rules, every detail of the game, or master the dice. None of those have any bearing on the best part of D&D, which of course is the experience playing with your friends. Number 2, D&D is an exercise in collaborative creation. Number 3, if you don't have friends who are interested in playing or want to play with anyone who does, and you will find friends in the experience of the game. Couldn't agree more. Number 4, D&D is a game that teaches you how to look for the clever solution, share a sudden idea that can overcome a problem, cross-functional experience and learning. And I've actually taken that into my personal and professional life, so I completely agree there. Funnily enough, if that's a word, these words are actually written by Mike Mearls in the PHP at a time when he was a proprietor of everything that made D&D special back in 2014. So lots of great things there, and I'm actually going to continue this in an article that takes tips directly from the text of the D&D 5e Player's Handbook. Story first. Embellishments amongst friends. That's a good one too, Dana. Yeah, that definitely scans. Embellishments amongst friends. We're going to talk in a little bit about, so you've all heard the rule of cool. The rule of cool originated way back. It's actually baked into the text of Dungeons and Dragons as well. It's just called something different. So it's that's something that was actually woven into the fabric of Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPGs in general, long before it was, let's say, rebranded by anyone that you might be familiar with. PvP is not at your tables unless it's league play, event specific. Yeah, that makes sense. 100% accurate on all points, Kelly. Also, funnily is a word. Thank you. Good to know. Sometimes it's hard to tell if like some of these things just become so common that whether they're actually grammatically correct after I just like, had a whole piece about being grammatically correct and clearing your corners on structure. Do as I say, not as I do. Let's head back to the bar, shall we? This way. Yeah, we'll go back and forth in between segments. And as I continue to evolve the stream, I'd like to see this start to flow a little bit more like a talk show, which I think is fun. And we'll see if it works. And if not, if you guys don't like it, then we'll trash it. Because like I said, know your audience. I'm going to get enjoyment out of this either way, so I want you folks to enjoy it as much as possible too. How are you guys doing so far? We're doing okay? Yeah, I agree with you on PvP too, Josh. I don't generally I don't fold PvP into things. I think conflict is great to have, that like delicious tension between characters. But two things when it comes to PvP. I don't mind infighting a little bit, even if it comes to blows sometimes, but you have to make sure that everyone's on board so that that conflict doesn't transcend the characters and start to bleed into the players. Then you've got a real problem amongst friends, which is not good. But two, if you can storify and make it narrative, it really makes sense. One example I'll use is a long time ago in a playthrough of Lost Mines, I had a half-orc warrior fighter. And my friend was playing a paladin, and he was kind of like dumb and honestly like made some questionable decisions that kind of sucked for me as a player, because we got to a point in the story where my backstory was coming in, and there was a great engagement where I was facing off with the warrior of another orc tribe, and it was this big kind of like Clash of Titans thing, and this player like jumped out and did something stupid and turned it into a battle and threw that whole narrative part away. My character, and admittedly I carried that for a little bit, but ultimately we turned it into this storification of like, that was my character's chance to prove himself in the eyes of a tribe that was important to him. And this character had cost him that. So they developed this animosity. And then in the town of Phandalin, center square, with lots of onlookers, they finally just went at it. And we fought and we bore down until we were both bruised, broke, and sweaty. I ultimately did come out on top of that. But then it was kind of like this. Is that what you needed? Yeah, it was. And we kind of like clasped hands, and it was a really great bonding experience in that regard, but it was also handled very carefully. We're the type of people, players, and friends who can get through something like that, but otherwise it can also cause absolute disaster and a quake in the culture of your table too, so you want to be mindful of that. Is that the Elgato Stream Deck you're using for that transition? No, this is just a Stinger. That's a Stinger transition that is a function of OBS. I use OBS for all my streaming. So I built that motion transition in Apple Motion and exported it as an MP4 and just brought that into the scene transitions in OBS. So every time I change scenes, it does that stinger. Yeah. I don't have a Stream Deck. I kind of looked into it. I think eventually I might be there. I just don't think I'm there yet. But yeah. Awesome. I enjoy the flow of the show. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's good. I try to keep it like polished but organic. You know what I mean? I'm not like a fancy glitzy show. I'm one person and a bunch of people who are important to me. And I wanted to feel a little bit clean, but not overdone, I guess. I've done that in my past in streaming. And in the interest of sharing, like I said earlier, what caused me to fall out of streaming is I tried to do too much too fast, and I wanted it to be this big like studio style production, but I'm one person and it's just not reasonable. And I fell out of love with it because, like I said earlier, it was just too much work for me to find enjoyment. And when the work starts to eclipse the enjoyment, you've got a problem to resolve there, I think. Josh, tension, absolutely. The core is set with cooperative gameplay, a group towards a common goal. That being said, competitive gameplay like Adventurers League can set up non-hostile play. Yeah, that's true. And that's a bit of a different beast too, right? That's true. As like PvP can also be collaborative, right? And I think that's the way to keep it healthy. PvP can be important for character development, but yes, has to not be personal, which to be honest, I think is how it usually starts, with a friendly nudge. Yeah, you're right. it either bleeds from personal animosity into the game or vice versa, right? Got to define the lines for sure. If it's not to the death / managed with temporary HP or something, it can be fun to get into PvP brawls. But when it turns into player-loved characters meeting their end at the hands of another player, yeah, no, that can incur a little real-world animosity. Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a line there to draw, too. Like, I knew I was never going to kill this guy. Like, I was never out to kill my fellow player. I would not want to be responsible for that. Oh, that's a terrible thing to think about for me. Good flow, good show. You're good. Thanks, Dana. Appreciate the vote of confidence. Much love, much love. It's a great setup. Perfect you have going. Good. Thanks, Josh. I think I'm settling into the groove that I want for this, and now it's just going to be about little improvements. Baby steps, right? Keep it bite-sized. And then we grow from there, as we discussed. Let's talk about some DM tips that I have to offer the community. My first DM tip this week is that music makes for great ambiance. Create some playlists for events like combat, dungeons, forests, and other settings in your game using platforms like Spotify or Sirenscape or whatever you prefer. It's going to help you kind of build out the look and feel of your game and really adds a nice immersive tone to what your players can experience at your table. Now, of course, if you're streaming or you're producing that for content, make sure they have some kind of copyright clarity on the music that you're using, because you don't want to be in a situation where down the road, some of that falls on the wrong side of someone else's claim, and always credit your artists, of course. DM tip number 2 for this week, offer experience bonuses for non-combat objectives. This inspires thinking beyond just the hack and slash of the game and characters looking out for combat opportunities as the only way they can progress. A lot of times I'll award experience not only for thinking outside of the box and being creative, solving a storied problem, but I might also offer the same experience for combat as I would for avoiding that combat in a creative way. Think outside of the box of how you reward your players, and they'll reward you in kind by thinking outside of the box and how they play. Just a couple of my faves. Some of you may have heard some of these before, but there's a new format for it, so that's why we're producing those. During stream lets me kind of kill several birds with one slingshot. You guys ever use a sling in D&D? You ever have a player who used a sling as a weapon? My players walking through a forest with appropriate ambience and bird song, and then at a certain point killed the bird song. It wasn't until they had to roll a perception check they noticed the birds had stopped singing. That danger was afoot. Yes, I love that. I have my resources are taxed with just managing a playlist, but I wish... and I might look into this down the road. I had some kind of like soundboard to bring effects into it like that. I know Sirenscape is usually pretty good with that too. But and the reason I make the comment about copyright too is because we do produce an actual play, and I have a couple of podcasts that are public facing. So I do have an agreement with the people who produce the music for all of my casts as well. But it's important to make sure you cover that off too. Especially with Spotify. I mean, if you're streaming a game, let's say on Twitch or whatever your platform of choice is, and you're using a Spotify playlist, and a lot of that stuff is going to be stand for copyright. You could get through a really great 3-hour playthrough of your stream, and you go back to the VOD and realize that all the sound has been muted because you had some copyrighted material playing in the background, and nobody wants to go through that after all that work. That's heartbreaking. You know, but when done properly, I'm a big stickler on music in my game. I dislike playing D&D without music, actually. I actually dislike it. I have to have it. I have to have that soundtrack playing. Gotta have that dungeon soundtrack thumping in the background, the racing combat beats that drive conflict in the game. They're awesome. I like to have about 10 to 20 sounds ready to go for a campaign when you're gaming in person. Cracking branches in the deep nighttime woods, the low moan of the undead down a corridor ahead. That's awesome. What do you use for something like that, Kelly? What do you actually use to create all those? Because I imagine like you've got to have them pretty much at the ready, right? because you can't like search through and play a sound effect in a moment. Or are they baked into the soundtrack and the soundtrack just kind of plays based on where you are? Yeah, tell me how you manage that. In the meantime, third DM tip for the week in session 0. Try to cover your policy on things like rules, challenges, cooperation and teamwork, etiquette and respect, as well as how you handle scheduling and absences in the game. Covering off these kinds of early table setting cultural items are going to help prevent any conflicts that you have based on those items down the line. So you want to understand what your approach is to the setting, your style of magic, your style of play, combat. Is it RP heavy, more combat heavy, a little bit of both, more high fantasy, more realistic, as well as how you're going to handle, when somebody can't make it for a session or you have scheduling conflicts. What do you do with that character, that player in the moment? Setting these expectations early is important for having a good long-term experience with that game, and hopefully many more sessions to come. Ambience, same thing. Different regional spellings. Yes, exactly. Ambiance. Ambiance. You buy sound packs and then use Winamp? Oh, nice. Nice. That's a good grassroots solution. I love it. Ambiance. Rodripsy88, welcome. Thank you for the star charge. I don't know if it's called, but I just made that up, and it looks like that's what that thing should be called. Welcome, Rod. Welcome. Please feel free to toss me a follow or whatever it's called on Mixer. Still getting into that platform. I like it a lot, actually. Good to have you on board. Welcome aboard. If you haven't done so already, I mean. That said, you have the correct spelling for my region. Touche. Ambiance. I myself don't use ambiance. I create ambiance by my style. I'm going to see how many people I can trigger with my new pronunciation of ambiance. I love your ambiance. Thank you. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of ambiance and ambient sounds. Triggered. Okay. Let's get back to work here. Let's talk about a player tip for this week, because the players need tips too. If you're playing in a streamed game, watch your words. It's not just about you and those at the table anymore. Be courteous and responsible. When you're playing in a streamed game, you have to know that those etiquette skills and those cultural skills that you develop at the table now transcends to you, however many viewers you have, and whoever's going to be watching those VODs for days to come. Be considerate, be courteous, think a little bit ahead, and make sure that that brain to mouth filter is active and fine-tuned before you press play. Random, anyone ever read the Steve Jackson, Ian Livingstone Fighting Fantasy series? Never. Sounds cool, though. Really great examples in there for how to generate a lot of emotion and environment in a short snippet of narrative. Nice. Steve Jackson. What else did Steve Jackson do? Did he do Last Airbender? Did he do that? Take 20, great advice. Thank you. Yeah, I had to reel in the filter sometimes. Yeah, especially when you're streaming online, and with the growing popularity that this has become, I guess, or has gained. People need to be doubly aware of what you say, and that goes for social too. I mean, Take 20, Josh, Kelly, all you cats. Like you've been online for a while. You've been in the Twitter sphere. You know that it's like there are some people do take advantage of that. They're like, whatever, my platform, my opinion, suck it. But that's a style, right? It's a choice. It's not mine, and I know it's not yours either. So you have to be mindful. The words matter, and opinions change and norms change. So you either adapt with them or you sink your feet deep into the sand and you stay in the fucking 70s or wherever you're stuck. The more you know. Hence the spell. It is a flare. Hence the spell. I may have lost my context there in the scrolling of text. I apologize in advance. Not the director, different guy, same name. Steve Jackson. Oh, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm thinking Percy Jackson. Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm thinking Percy Jackson, and I'm mixing that up with Steve Jackson and The Last Airbender. I'm just like in a nerd shitstorm, and I'm going to stop talking right now. You create your brand. Absolutely. Read Steve Jackson. Right. I'm going to stop because there's no way for me to not make this worse. I trust you, and I will look that up after the stream. I draw a lot of inspiration from books, though, don't you? What other kinds of mediums do you draw inspiration for when you're running games or building games? I just smashed together Steve Jackson, The Last Airbender, and Percy Jackson. Anywho, I'm a terrible nerd. I'm such a nerd poser. Player tip number 2 for the week. Try to remember non-plot details about the NPCs. Like if they like a certain flower or cosmetic, then try to bring that NPC a gift. See what happens. This is a little kind of in-game play tip that I've experienced as a DM, and it's really kind of special for me too. And I love that a player did this. They remember things about the NPCs they meet, and then they play into those NPC stories. And that for me as a DM, I was like, I'm included too. It was really kind of cool because it allowed me to go beyond the story and just beyond the NPC and into a really cool kind of encounter where things that I was saying or I was sharing through these NPCs were being retained and then utilized in the story. And that I thought it was a really cool account. So I encourage all of you players out there to surprise your DMs that way and maybe introduce a little something into your own story. You never know. It could kick off a really cool arc just by doing those little kinds of interactions with NPCs too. For ambiance, for ambiance. That'd make a great movie, I'm sure. Yeah, sounds good. Lord of the Lightning Benders. This summer, Steve Jackson, Percy Jackson, and The Last Airbender present Lord of the Lightning Benders. We are spinning gold today, my friends. Spinning gold! That's the universal symbol for spinning gold. Can anyone edit that? So that I'm like spinning gold into the air. Zelda. Oh, Zelda for inspiration, Dana? Yeah, good choice. Yep, nothing wrong with that. Kelly, question. How much backstory do you give NPCs? I usually create at least a paragraph or two for every NPC, some with potential ties and links to other story arcs and campaigns, just in case I have to segue them from being an NPC to a PC due to player interaction. Yeah, for me, it depends on what part that NPC plays in a moment. I have a convention that works really well to kind of holistically tackle that, and that is the approach that the world is constantly running in the back of my mind. So if I have a region, let's say like a village, then I constantly run in the back of my mind the influences on that village, which helps me understand the influences on its civilians, which gives me a little bit of backstory for every NPC in that location. And then from there, if a player is interacting with a bartender and it doesn't go beyond that, I'm fine. I've gotten a lot better with just pulling names that make sense out of the air. So if they go deeper into an NPC, I pull a name. And then with that name in the same sweep, I kind of concoct what that NPC's day might have been like. So I go a little bit further into their backstory mentally. And then if they go beyond that, then I'll actually start to craft from there backwards. And I might take that out. I'll try to buy myself enough time to do that at a session. So here's an example. There's an NPC who's now an important part of the story called Ore in the Charisma Check podcast. Ore was an administrative assistant who worked at a luxury palace that my players were tasked with breaking into and freeing prisoners inside of. in the combat that ensued, Rehnquist had saved and rescued this administrative assistant from otherwise unsavory employers. So at the moment, Ore was a name I pulled off of my sheet with a backstory of she's the administrative assistant at this palace. From there, as he started to discuss things with her. I improv that she had no real family there in Hillsfar, which made sense for her to accompany them and have nothing to leave behind. That she had struggled from like job to job just to make enough coin to pay for her modest rent in this little suite. And then by then, that got me through the rest of that session. And then I was able to craft a bit more of a narrative for her. And realistically, from there, her story starts at that point. So any backstory that happens organically through the run of the game. That's kind of my approach to it. I don't bake backstory for every NPC, but there are some NPCs that I know have, let's say, a very good chance of being a longer term investment in the campaign. And for those characters, I'll actually do a 2-liner that is their gender, race, name, gender, race, and then a second section, which is class, subclass, background, and then voicing notes. And that's about as far as I go for anyone who might be part of the story. And then I build their background based on what happens from there. Just I create those thick. Well, although I admire that approach, Kelly, and the time it takes to do it, though. If I could choose and I had the time to do it, I would gladly write at least a paragraph for every NPC. So I think there's a ton of merit in that. For me, it just comes down to time and efficiency. Josh, I create those thick worlds living and breathing. Yeah, everything with interaction has a story revealed in whatever depth necessary. Absolutely. I think if you constantly in the back of your mind have your world living, and that includes like plot arcs and stuff. Often a campaign will branch into multiple arcs. And just because the players chose arc 1 doesn't mean that arc 2 and 3 pause, right? So if you have a demi-lich who's trying to escalate into godhood down one avenue, and you have an evil corporation that is abducting children from a village down another path, and you have a long-lost family member who needs help securing the homestead in another path, and your characters choose to go down the homestead path and help that character, then the corporation who's abducting children continues to do so, and the demi-lich who's chasing godhood continues to do so. So if my players chose either one of them first, that will dramatically change the outcome of the other two in the rest of the world. That's an always on living, breathing environment approach. Yes. While I still have a voice to call my own, let's go into a new segment that I call Sage Advice Unfurled. And with Sage Advice Unfurled, we explore some of the most hotly contested mechanics in Dungeons & Dragons as served and mediated by Jeremy Crawford, the lead rules designer for Dungeons & Dragons, and of course the Sage Advice Compendium that he pens every other week. Let's take a look. And by take a look, I mean take a look. So let's take a look. In Sage Advice Unfurled this week, we're continuing with the idea of errata. So last week we talked about errata, and in a short form, they're like a patch or update to previously published materials to correct oversights that might come when those materials go to market. So errata is important because it does change those rules officially. So it's important to know what's updated, what's changed, because often there are little balance tweaks and changes. So the current errata that's available or has been made available for the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeons Master's Guide. Now, as we know, those are the 3 main rule books of Dungeons & Dragons. So if errata is being made for the core rules, you do well to at least take a look and see what's been changed. Horde of the Dragon Queen and the Rise of Tiamat overall campaign has errata, as does Princes of the Apocalypse, Out of the Abyss, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, Volo's Guide to Monsters, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. So if you're using any of those compendiums or rule sets, which I know a lot of you are, it would do you well to check into the errata to see what's changed since they were published and bring those new official rule sets and changes into your game. So there's going to be more to come on that. I'll go into detail on all the errata another time or in another piece. But errata does often make sweeping and important changes to those rule sets. A little bit of detail is very instrumental in coloring and shading the environment. Absolutely. Makes it different, right? And consistency in that is important too. That's why as a DM or GM, it's important to take notes so that when your characters return to NPCs, then you have consistency in the experiences, right? If your characters come back to a city and someone who was a dwarf yesterday is a halfling today, and their name's slightly different, their accent's different, and they don't seem to understand or remember anything that you discussed, then it breaks the immersion for those characters, right? There's no consistency or fluidity in the environment they're playing in. Josh, exactly. There are more than one path continuing to play out. The spotlight in the story is always centered on the player characters, but it's up to the DM to expand their view into new world and into worlds. Shambazzle Games cannot word. It's not something I pretend to not be true. Okay. And this is how I talk when the words give me trouble. I don't know what this is. Maybe this is a future NPC for me to play with. New rules. Exactly, new rules. They're new. The rules for the rules. Errata. Continuing on with Sage Advice Unfurled. The Sage Advice Compendium is considered official rulings, or are considered official rulings for D&D 5e beyond any public statements that are made. So if Jeremy Crawford publishes something in Sage Advice, that takes precedence over something that was said in a blog or an Ask Me Anything or anything like that. So Jeremy Crawford will typically answer things and respond to things on Twitter and AMAs, but the definitions in Sage Advice actually supersede those, and even by proxy of the errata, some of the previously materials that have been published. Jeremy Crawford officially is the only person at Wizards of the Coast who can make founded claims about 5e rules. So the great universal tiebreaker usually comes from Jeremy Crawford himself. And of course, as the game master, the final rule is yours. But it's not bait and pomp for rules lawyers. Like I was saying, for those of us who like to understand as best we can the core rules that govern the system and how the game is played, it doesn't make us rules lawyers. It just means we want to have the most common ground and the best understanding of that common ground between how the game is run and how our players' expectations are of how those games should play out or how those experiences should play out. Remember, the most important thing about the rules is consistency and the expectation on both sides of the screen. I've run the same core for over 20 years. I've added to it, but never had to rewrite or take away. Nice. You can also use all published editions at your table at the same time. The widest selection. Yes, no boundaries there. I like it. Consistency is key. That's core of contingency. It helps develop the repeatable play. Right, and this is what I say, like, it's a game. Games have rules, but also your players, you have to have a common understanding of how things work between players and DM. The analogy I use for that too is soccer, right? Like if we all show up on Sunday to play soccer, but my understanding of the rules of soccer is different from your understanding of the rules of soccer, how do you think that game's going to go? Right? Like if you say, well, in soccer, the rules state that I should be able to pick up the ball and throw it over my head at the net. And my understanding of the rules of soccer is that you can only use your feet. Then that's going to definitely create some conflict in the game we're about to play, right? That's why the rules are important. And that's why consistency in the rules are equally important. All right, so another continuing item from Sage Advice Unfurled this week, exploring the Sage Advice Compendium. What are the rules for, and this is straight from Sage Advice itself, in the DM ruling dichotomy? Well, D&D, like we say, is a game, and games have rules. Those rules are intended to organize and inspire the events at the table. They're intended to be effective tools, and tools need to have people to bring them to life. It's a symbiotic relationship. So you need to have an understanding of the rules, and the rules have to empower you to play. They're not intended to severely limit players, but rather form the baseline of how the game is understood and how things work. They're the foundation of rules for the GM to build on. During the typical session, any DM will make dozens and dozens of adjustments and in-game calls on the rules, so that it should be expected that the rules will invariably change, but that doesn't make them unimportant. So we should expect the rules to change. We should expect things to be unclear and called in the moment. It comes down to support and understanding, right? Coming from 1E to 2E, the flattened level advancement experience table is a bit tough to take. Yeah, okay, I got you there. I've adapted now, of course, and still new to 5th edition, but curious about how you feel re the fairness of the 5E method versus earlier versions where each class had individual experience requirements for level advancements. Fighter Warriors, yeah. So I hated it, but I'm biased because I always played Paladin in 2E D&D, so it always took me like way longer to level than anyone else. So just for some context, in earlier editions of Dungeons and Dragons, every class had its own experience table. So right now, for example, in 5e, it's unified, right? It's global. Progression is global. Everybody levels at level 1, 2, 3, 4 at exactly the same threshold, right? So you hit level 2 at 300 experience. You hit level 3 at, I think, 900 experience. You hit level 4 at 2,700, if I remember correctly. And I'm not showing off. Those are the only 4 I know because I have characters at those levels right now. In earlier editions, those were each class had its own, and they were often kind of punishing. And as a paladin, like almost a devoted exclusive paladin player, I found that progress really punishing. It did add some variety, which is kind of nice, but I would have to say, honestly, personally, I have no problem with the unified leveling structure of 5e. At least like the classes themselves progress in a slightly different pace, right? So you have, for example, most of the core classes will get their subclass at level 3, but there are things like clerics that get their devotion at level 1. There are warlocks that get their pact magic at level 1 and their pact boon, I think it is, at level 2, I think. So there's some variety there, which I think is nice. Variety is still good, but I think experience leveling unification is one of the things that has benefited the, that concentrated approach more than hindered it. D&D has always had a constantly changing rule set due to creator communication mishaps or play. Yeah, and they also had a ton of official materials in earlier versions of D&D, of course, had a ton of different contributors, right? You got somebody totally different writing the player's handbook than somebody who wrote the Monstrous Manual or the DM's Guide. Or even slightly different variations of the rules themselves. And the level advancement seems to happen much more rapidly unless the campaign and challenges are tailored to prevent over-rapid succession. Yeah, there are two pieces of that. One, yes, it's true. Like, 1, 2, and 3 go by like that. The validation I find there that works, though, is players are so vulnerable level 1 and 2, but especially 1. I think that rapid succession is kind of good. It's almost like a lot of people would consider level 3 the first level, right? And that's kind of the side effect of that. And I think that's okay. If you look at like level 1, 2 as kind of like your origin story levels, then it's okay to get them over with because a lot of people skip by them. And a lot of people actually start characters at level 3 now. So it kind of makes those first 2 levels a little optional. And those are usually the ones that I find go by really fast and easy. From there, you're right. The second piece is it's really up to then the style of the game to dictate how quickly players progress. I don't like milestone experience because I feel like it's a little too baked for me. I like players being rewarded more frequently and almost immediately for those actions. So I give post-session experience, and honestly, it almost works out the same from a progression standpoint. The difference is my player reap the rewards of their work every session, rather than having to go through like a story segment. They'd be like, okay, now you're all level 2, or now you're all level 3. I've always found like watching your experience grow to be a really special element of the game. So that's why I don't like milestone experience myself, or milestone leveling. So, so my piece on that, I think is I curb it a little bit. Like, we've been playing Charisma Check for 2.5 years now, and my players are just hit level 9. And a lot of people say like, wow, that's really slow progression. Of course, we don't play weekly, but I mean, that's a lot of sessions. I mean, it's probably about 60 sessions we've played, and my character's a level 9. Some people would look at that and be like, that's crazy. You're terrible. You're torturing your players. But I have had no complaints at the table. It's a nice, slow, easy leveling process where they grow into it. Everyone's happy with the progress. No one levels out quickly. They have enough time to spend in a level that there's an experience to each level, rather than like, okay, you ever been power leveled in a video game and you're like, okay, great, now I'm max level, but like the whole game meant nothing. You know what I mean? So that's where I like to strike the fine balance. You don't want people to accelerate so quickly that they just forget the experience of moving between level checkpoints. I love the vulnerable time when even an orc or bear still holds some tension and drama during an encounter. I totally agree. I would never sacrifice level 1. It's super dangerous. Honestly, it takes a long time to recreate that level of tension and danger at later levels, but it can be done, and that's up to the GM too. A lot of people will argue that that's an effect of the system, but it's not, right? Like, it's not any more than your ability as a GM to change that does or doesn't exist. Josh, you would save all the errata, erase, change, update as written. They could simply be options to the core. They do a great story. Story is their bread. Mechanics, rules, their butter. People like jam. Good analogy. I like it. Yeah, for sure. There's always, Kelly, yeah, for sure. There's always ways to keep that tension going as the players progress, for sure. But I do love the young characters where they're just taking their first tentative steps into dangerous lands. Absolutely, yeah. I love that. Maybe you could be like level 1 forever. But I don't think they'd enjoy that either. I think that's the reason why they had the overhaul, Josh says. They need a person in-house that handles that specific job. Consistency, communication, template, a unified creative space always creates, always. Yeah, and I think Jeremy Crawford's done a really good job of that. I think the change around Mike Mearls is a little more nuanced. I think there are some political missteps that happen there, and I think it's the right move for Wizards to make. I won't say anything else about that because this is not a show about politics. But I think good decisions were made there. Ultra Venom, Kelly, yeah, power leveling really can decimate the experience of a narrative. Absolutely. And I mean, there's no real power leveling in D&D, but I guess it would be the same effect, right? As blasting through levels, you lose all that, what makes it special going from one to the next. I have a DM, Josh says, that is new and uses milestones. It is base, session level, or encounter level, then comes depth or directional situation XP. It's easier taught when you can slow it down a bit. Yeah, exactly. And I'm not slamming milestone leveling. A lot of people use it. It's not for me. But I can definitely see how it could present value in taking some of the heavy lifting off newer DMs or DMs who just want one less thing to worry about, right? Because the flip side of that is I have to calculate and present experience and those rewards every session too, right? So that's a big part of it, I suppose. Rounding out Sage Advice Unfurled this week, we want to talk about how are the rules analyzed and presided over by Jeremy Crawford via his Sage Advice column and compendium. Jeremy uses 3 basically checkpoints or filters to analyze how and when these rules apply. Step 1 is RAW or raw or rules as written. This is the textual definition of what the words actually say in reference to and in a near mathematical sense of how they apply. They're standalone, straight copy objective, and devoid of any further interpretation. Step 2 is RAI, or rules as intended, and this covers the intent behind a rule or what the designers meant when they created that rule. So ideally, rules as written and rules as aligned are aligned. Ideally, rules as written and rules as intended are aligned, but the obscurity is where Sage Advice comes in those little in-between spaces or obscurity around the rules, and where game masters typically conflict on the purpose and logic of those rules. Rules as intended is further explored in Sage Advice clarifications and really where the crux of it comes from. Step 3 is RAF, or rules as fun. And this is what I was saying, you may have heard of it as rule of cool. But the final step in determining rules applications is really subjective and simple. And regardless of what's on the page or what was intended in the rule, The rule in the end has to be in favor of what's the most fun for you and your table. It's the basis of the rule of cool, which has been popularized by other folks. And typically, a healthy mix of rules as written, rules as intended, and rules as fun presents the right recipe for making the best campaign experiences you can as a GM or player. Of the 10 DMs you oversee, 4 of which use Milestone as situational XP. That way they can train. Gotcha. Oh, yeah. So, like, train for the levels. I have for 10 different experience options for gameplay that you created. Nice. And, of course, we support all manners of DM creative space and how they reward players. Yeah, that diversity is needed. And love your DM. In my unbiased opinion, I obviously agree with that. Kelly, base experience amounts for creatures. Do you modify these? Oh, base experience amounts for creatures. Do you modify these numbers according to each creature based on the creature's physical attributes or other factor, or based on how the creature was defeated, or give the players the amount written in the rules books? For me, it's the latter. I will award the experience for the creatures based on their entry in the Monstrous Manual or the rule books. And the reason I'm able to do that is from start to finish, I use the rules stipulated for progression and strength in the game. And that makes balancing super easy for me. So here's what I mean by that. First of all, it starts with character creation. I use Stat Array, or a standardized, more balanced version of character build. Basically what that means is I don't do roll 4, leave 1, right? I don't do the roll 4, take 3 or whatever it is. I don't have any characters who have like 6 18s or, something stupid like that. It's very balanced, but there's lots of diversity in how my players allocate those abilities and how their racial attributes impact those abilities. So I've never had a problem there. So that means that the players are all, while they're all diverse and unique, they fit into a formula. And I know that has a negative connotation, but keep in mind that that never factors in anywhere else. No one ever feels that. It just lets me know that all the ingredients are from the same set. Then we have the experience progression, which we talked about. And then I go into challenge rating and I modify my encounters always based for players who know how to play and work well together. I only provide deadly encounters. And that's a direct reference to the encounter experience table and challenge ratings outlined by both the Monstrous Manual and the DM's Guide. So I build my encounters against a very deadly setting, which is an XP threshold based on your players and some math there. So from that, I can actually use the challenge rating to determine how many of what types of monsters would present a deadly challenge to my players, keep them engaged and challenged, but also not over or under tuned. So that's most of my encounters. The other 2 encounters that my players might experience are very easy. I'll throw those at them. Like maybe it's just a bunch of goblins, something they know they can beat, but it lets them flex as characters and use like their godly powers and feel good about it. And they can also run into way overtuned combatants or enemies that they have no business taking on. They take a wrong turn, they end up in front of a red dragon. Guess what? The game is not now about you beating that red dragon. The game is about you creatively finding a way to get out of there with your lives. So from that allows me to use the system in the Monstrous Manual that is more widespread and global, of using the experience in those stat blocks to define both how the characters are rewarded by defeating them and how many of them are at play in any combat encounter. So that's one part of it. The other part is about how I award that. So I have 2 different streams of experience awards. I have story experience and combat experience. Story experiences are individual. So if they conquer a story pivot or a story point, then they'll get experience for that story point that's relevant to what level they are. So early levels, it's like 100 experience, and then they each get that. Combat experience is divided by how many participants are present in the combat. So if I have 4 players, they beat something, they get the experience value of that combatant divided by 4. Everything else is individual. And I've never had a problem with that progression. It always progresses my players nicely. It allows them to experience both overwhelming danger and underwhelming odds in battle, as well as things that are tuned for them. So there's deviation in that, so nothing feels baked or pre-planned or anything like that. So that's worked out really well for me. Rules as intended, alignment, rules as written has issues. Rules as intended, alignment with rules as written has issues. Yeah, absolutely. That's why they have a whole compendium to speak to it. In my opinion, they legalize instead of formalize. Guidance is the flavor that better supports the masses. Yeah, and that's why I think those three come together, right? RAI, RAW, and rules is fun. Yeah, I like that. Good stuff. Yeah. Hopefully it's helpful. I reward experience in a XP in a wide range. I'll be uploading all those to YouTube. Nice. At least you have 3 core base monster experience for success against it. Base XP for uniqueness and defeat, not just death resolution. I do that too. I will award a lot of times if players circumvent combat in a unique and creative way, to me that's still a victory, and I will still award the combat experience for avoiding combat in some cases. Unless they just sneak around and then, or don't go down that path, then I'm not going to say like, well, you get that experience too. If they're engaged in it, but it's more about overcoming combat than it is about killing everything. Let me put it that way. Josh, I use challenge rating in a new, more versatile way with some simple corrections. Shambazzle hinted at a similar use of CR. There is a way, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of ways to apply it, right? I also run 3 types of XP, Josh. Yeah, like you mentioned, story, combat, role play. Yeah. So for me, my approach would be that story and role play are somewhat intertwined in that case. But I agree with you there. Helpful take on XP. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what do you find works for you, Kelly? Yeah, building encounters is fun. It's one of my favorite things to do. Building the encounters, and like you kind of stack this really cool, nuanced engagement. And then in the game, I just sit back and I let it play out. I don't, I'm not vying for either or. If anything, I'm probably in the corner of my players, right? I'm cheering for them to beat this thing that I've created. But when I'm creating it, I'm thinking about the challenge and the difficulty that it is invariably going to present from them. All right, so that wraps up Sage Advice Unfurled for this week. I wanted to introduce our fine community to it. Next week, we're really going to dive into the Sage Advice Compendium piece by piece and talk about what all these rules, conflicts, obscurities, and clarifications are and what they mean for the game. We're going to get right into the nitty-gritty of each one of these components and go through it in detail. We're going to talk specifically about some of those most hotly contested rules, and we'll build more complete videos that showcase what we've discussed every single week, and of course daily on Twitter at Shambazzle Games. So do follow me there. Check out my YouTube channel and subscribe so that you'll see all of these videos in their final form when they're done, and we'll see you around the community. Happy gaming. That's my sign off for Sage Advice Unfurled. With that, I don't know about you guys, I'm thirsty, so I'll see you at the bar. Absolutely, combat isn't the only resolution. Yeah, in fact, I would say combat is the most basic, easiest application of finding a resolution. I'm always a big fan of those things that play outside of those lines, right? Yeah. It's never as much fun to take the easy route, right? There's so much nuance and so much innovation that comes from it. That's what makes D&D magical for me. And I think especially for us as GMs, that's where the joy is for us, right? Our friends get to show up, play, embody a character, live in that character's life for a moment. For us, it's about all the little things in between, right? It's the glue. It's the experiences that connect all of those micro experiences together into a greater overarching experience. I get 30 cents on Twitch every time I say experience. I should anyway. I separate story as my intentions of resolution and role play as players' intentions. That's interesting. Expand on that a little bit if you can, Josh. I separate story as my intentions of resolution and role play as players' intentions. Oh, for the experience breakdown, you mean? I see. So do I understand that right, Josh, then, in saying your story experience are things they hit that are in your kind of, I don't like to say plan, but let's say plan for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? Nothing's railroaded, but your vision, like you said, your intentions. And then role play is how your players approach that in different ways. Very nice. I like that approach. Some new innovation. Of course, I'm always learning from you, the community, more than anything. I love to do this because it's all about the interaction for me. I draw so much from you folks. I hope that I can give you back half of what you're giving me week after week, every Saturday morning, right here on Speaking Common from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's what we do for it. That's this back and forth. That's what I live for. Kelly, I'll give less experience for a creature if the players were to, say, kill a major monster in a single fell swoop without using any cunning, intellect, or other measure of actual experience. That makes sense to me, too. Yeah, XP, experience. Ching, ching, ching. I should have a tip jar. Tip jar. I should have a little tip jar every time I say experience that just fills up with like friendship dollars. Just like my little rap to you. That was totally freestyle. I know you might think I'm a professional, but I don't. I'm not a rapper. But based on that display of skill, I can see how that might be confusing. That makes sense to me, though, Kelly. That makes sense too. I can't disagree with that approach. I mean, like, that. First of all, isn't that frustrating as hell when you have a big bad and they're all stacked up and you understand every corner of them and you've got an idea of how this battle's going to go and it's going to be epic, it's going to be awesome, it's going to challenge them, it's going to tax their resources, it's going to force them to dig deep into the fiber of what drove them to adventure in the first day, and then they blow all their like cooldowns and end it in a round. First of all, that's frustrating anyway. Then, yeah, I could see like, so what would you do? Would you just give them kind of base experience for that then? And if they were a little bit more frustrating but hilarious, yes, it is. It always results in laughs either way, but we've all had that experience, right? Come on. Not a one of us who sat behind the screen has ever not had your players just completely trash a big bad that you thought was going to be a real threat. All right, gang. Thank you so much, as always, for hanging out with me this Saturday morning. Giveth of your time generously to sit with me and chat D&D. There's a few things that I enjoy more than this. With that, I have also then given my voice, apparently. It's leaving me. I have to get better at that. I have to make sure I have water next time for the next stream of Speaking Common. Of course, if you want to hang out with me otherwise, I do Tuesday to Thursday, discretionary. I play games, video games from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, every Saturday right here at 11 o'clock a.m. to 2 p.m., kicking off your Saturday morning with the Speaking Common D&D newscast, D&D DM chat, and all things tabletop role-playing game, everything we love. Appreciate y'all. Thank you, Kelly, Josh, Dana, Mana Boy for following today, and Ultra Venom. Kelly, of course, thank you for the follow, for joining the Checkmates. Take 20 D&D, go check them out. Chicken Lee Nerdy, Nerdy Chicken, Nikki, Angela at Pleasant Doom, all my great folks. I love you, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. So until next time, Checkmates, happy gaming, be good to one another, and we'll see you next time right here on Shambazzle Games. Peace.